Hello, good morning, and welcome to this Horizon Implementation Day. My name is Peter HAERTWICH. I am a head of unit in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. My unit deals with the business processes for implementing our funding program Horizon Europe. Today's Implementation Day is the third in a row of implementation days that we organize in regular intervals. We have a first implementation day dealing with submission and evaluation of proposals that is dedicated in the first instance to applicants and potential applicants. We have a second version of the implementation day on grant agreement preparation, which is in the first instance addressed to successful applicants who are about to sign a grant agreement with us and start a project. And today's implementation day is the third in a row. It is about managing your grant, and it's of course addressed in the first instance to coordinators and beneficiaries who have a grant and want to know the details on how to manage them. The most important interactions when you have a grant and run it with the funding body is then we will have a second block dealing with the reporting and payments, again presenting the legal basis and then presenting the processes and the IT tools. On both blocks we have one question and answer session each. And finally, we have one session dealing with fraud prevention, detection and correction, which will also be followed by a short questions and answer session. The questions should be sent to us via Slido. So we would ask you in parallel to your browser for the streaming of this event to open a window and go to slide.do. The code for today's meeting in order to put your questions is HID for Horizon Implementation Day. We would ask you if there are already questions and you see that there is a question that you also wanted to put there, not to repeat the question, but to put a like to the question that is already there, so that we then can go in through the list of questions in the order of number of likes, so that we have at least a chance to go through the most popular questions in the limited time that we have available for questions and answers. I think that's enough in terms of introduction, and I hand over now to my colleague Selene DIAZ, who comes from our legal unit and will talk about the legal basis for amendments. Selene, over to you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Horizon Europe Implementation Day about grant management. My name is Selene Gonzalez. I work in the Common Legal Support Service of DG Research and Innovation. And today I will be guiding you through a presentation about grant management with a focus on amendments. And I will be talking about the legal basics, so the legal aspects of amendments to your grant agreement. And we can start with the presentation. Yes. So my first slide is an overview of the presentation. I will be first talking about the key features of amendments, what are the legal bases, and then we will explain the conditions to request an amendment and the procedure to launch it. And then I would like to also share with you some examples, some frequent cases when it is possible to request the amendment or when it's not possible. And let's start with the legal basis already. So my next slide and the next one, we show what's the legal basis for an amendment, and this can be found in Article 39 of your Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement. So what's the grant agreement? The grant agreement, it's the binding contract between you, the beneficiaries, and the granting authority. And this contract will set out the rights and obligations for your project, notably to carry out the task of your project in exchange of the EU funding, the Horizon Europe funding. So what is an amendment? An amendment is any change to this grant agreement. So it's any substantive change to your project that will need to be reflected in this binding agreement between the beneficiary on the one side and the granting authority in the other side. And here in my slide, we can see some features that the legal basis it's telling us already, notably what can be changed, what cannot be changed, and who can request the changes. So as I said, any data to your grant agreement or your annexes in the agreement can be changed. Any substantive modification that will affect the description of your action in Annex 1 can also be changed. Any project-specific data, for instance, the duration of your project, there is a substantive change with one of the participants. For instance, if there is one beneficiary that goes bankrupt, it will be necessary to reflect this change in your grant agreement. So it would be necessary to terminate the participation of this entity, of this beneficiary, and amend your grant agreement. And also we can make changes to the options in your agreement. What cannot be changed? Here we have the legal limitation explained in this Article 39, that you cannot make changes which would call into question the decision awarding the grant or breach the principle of equal treatment of applicants. So here it's the limit we have in this article. I will explain a bit later what does it mean in reality. And you can also, you can either make changes to the terms and conditions of your grant agreement. Because as you may know, your grant agreement is based on a template, a commission template that is used across all EU programs. So for all EU funded projects, we use this model, and we cannot change the general terms and conditions of this agreement. So it's only project-specific data. It's something that it changes to your particular project. And who can request the amendments? So amendments can be requested by any of the parties, either by the consortium on the one side, but in this case, it's only the coordinator of the consortium who is able to prepare the amendment and launch it and sign it. And also, on the other side, the granting authority can request an amendment. So the European Commission, an executive agency or funding body like a joint undertaking, they can also request an amendment, but in practice, the most common case, the common practice is that the consortium requests the amendment. These are the key features. And in my next slide, we will move to the conditions of the amendments that are also explained in the legal basis. And here, as I said, the amendment may not result in changes that, if they were known at the time of taking the decision awarding the grant, they would have had an impact on the decision and perhaps would not lead to the decision of awarding this grant. And what does it mean? This means, for instance, if you try to introduce a feature in your grant agreement through an amendment, your project is ongoing and you want to introduce a change, but it would be so significant, you would want to change your tasks, for instance, so much that it would make your project outside the scope of the topic, this change cannot be accepted, because if during the evaluation it could have been known that this project task would be so different from the description of the project, of the topic, perhaps it would not be awarded. So this type of changes would not be acceptable. We have also other examples of changes which we could consider that might have an impact on the decision awarding the grant. And for instance, these can be changes that have an impact on the assessment of the eligibility of a participant. So you know we have eligibility conditions to participate in Horizon Europe grants. If you try to introduce a change that would affect any of these eligibility conditions, this cannot be accepted either. For instance, in order to participate in multi-beneficiary grants, there are some minimum consortium composition requirements. So we ask, as a general rule, that there are 3 beneficiaries, and they have to be established in different countries, in different member states, or in an associated country. If during your project there is a change with one of the beneficiaries, because it moves to another country, for instance, that is not eligible, this will affect the minimum consortium composition that is a mandatory eligibility criteria to participate. And for instance, one beneficiary wants to leave and it will only be with 2 beneficiaries left in this consortium. So this we could not accept because it would render the project ineligible. Or for instance, if the call requires that there is an SME as a beneficiary, and then it turns out that this SME would leave the project, these type of changes that affect the eligibility of a participant would not be allowed. Changes that will breach the principle of equal treatment, again, they cannot be acceptable. Any change that affect the assessment of the work criteria, as I explained before. And also, it is a condition that any amendment cannot be against the applicable rules for your project. These are the Horizon Europe regulation, Horizon Europe rules, the grant agreement, and the financial regulation. So for instance, if you wish to introduce a change in your budget that will result in financing cost twice, what we call double funding of cost, this could not be acceptable because there is a rule in the financial regulation explaining that double funding is prohibited. So in any case, any changes have to comply with the applicable legal framework. Next slide, please. The legal basis also tell us that any amendment needs to be justified. And what does it mean? It means that the request for the amendment must include the reasons why the amendment is necessary and the appropriate supporting documents. So for instance, if you wish to amend your grant agreement to introduce a new entity because you have realized that it's necessary, and you want to introduce an affiliated entity. This is possible, you can do that, but you have to bear in mind that an affiliated entity is an entity that has a capital link or a legal link with a beneficiary. So when you request the amendment, you will have to prove that this link exists. So this is the type of supporting documents that we will ask depending on the type of amendment you wish to make to your grant agreement. And in any case, the granting authority can always request additional information if needed. And here I wanted to mention a specific case that we have foreseen in the legal basis, because it can happen that there is a request for an amendment of a change of the coordinator without its agreement. So in the cases where the consortium wishes to change the coordinator, but this coordinator does not agree, it is mandatory to submit as a supporting document as well the opinion of this coordinator, or at least the proof that this opinion has been requested. So this is also explained in Article 39. Okay, so these are for the conditions, and now let's move to the procedure in my next slide. And here I would try to explain just the key steps from the legal perspective and the timeline, but the procedure will be later explained in more detail by my colleagues in the next presentation, because this process is fully electronic. So you will have more detailed explanations on the business and process presentation. Okay, here I will be focusing on the key steps for an amendment when this amendment is triggered by the consortium, because as I said, this is the most common case. and I will focus on this timeline. But before I explain these key steps, I would like to emphasize that as a best practice, before launching any amendment, it is very strongly recommended that the participants get in touch with the project officer responsible for your project to explain the type of amendment and to confirm whether the amendment is necessary or not. Okay, so once this has been done and we reach the conclusion that the amendment is necessary, we have to follow certain steps. And as I said before, the consortium, this is for the case of amendment triggered by the consortium, but it's only the coordinator launching the request. So for that, before launching the request, the coordinator has to ensure that there is the internal agreement of the consortium. This has to be based on the internal decision-making process that you have set out within your consortium and which is in line with your consortium agreement. As you know, the consortium agreement is the internal document setting out the internal arrangements of your consortium. So before launching the request for amendment, we have to ensure that there is agreement internally. And in the specific case that I mentioned before of a change of coordinator without its agreement, of course, the amendment would have to be launched by another beneficiary, but normally it would be by the coordinator. So the amendment needs to be prepared with all the supporting documents, the justification, it has to be complete, and so on. And once ready, it is also recommended that before submitting officially the amendment, the coordinator sends it to the granting authority for informal assessment. So this will help very much to explain the reasons of the amendment and get in touch with the project officer for an informal assessment before submitting officially, because then the deadline starts to run. So once this is ready, the amendment request has to be signed. This is all done electronically, so it's signed by the coordinator and submitted. And then after this, the deadline starts to run and the granting authority has 45 days to accept or reject this amendment request. In any case, the granting authority can request additional information and extend this deadline. For instance, if there is a very complex amendment or it's an amendment about introducing a new participant and we have to do some compliance checks before, and it's already known that the amendment assessment would take more than 45 days, the deadline can be extended and we can request additional information or background documents, and then the deadline of 45 days will start counting from the date of receiving the new supporting documents. Then if the receiving party, so if the granting authority agrees with the amendment, it must sign the amendment in the IT tool. If it does not agree, it has to formally notify the disagreement in the same deadline in 45 days. However, if no notification is received within this deadline, it would mean that the request is considered to have been rejected. This means that if you don't receive an explicit notification that the amendment has been agreed by the granting authority, it can be considered that it's rejected. There is no tacit approval of an amendment. And also important to know for the consortium that an agreement request can be withdrawn at any moment before the counter signature of the receiving party. In my next slide, I will also explain important notions about important moments for the amendment, and these are the entry into force and taking effect of the amendment. So, an amendment enters into force after the signature of the receiving party, so after the last signature. And as the most common case that we have is that amendment is requested by the consortium, the amendment will enter into force with the signature of the granting authority. And when does it take effect? meaning when does the changes start to apply. Here we have two possibilities. It can be either on the date agreed by the parties, you can put that in your amendment, or it will be, if there is no date specified, it will be the entry into force, the date when the last party signs it. Okay, so if there is no date specified, it would be the date of the last signature. And this can have an impact on eligibility of cost, for instance. So yeah, depending on the nature of the amendment, the entry into force can have impact on the eligibility of your cost. For instance, if you want to add a beneficiary, you can put in your amendment that it will enter into force once the beneficiary signs the accession form, and then as from them, the cost will be eligible. Other important aspects about the timing that I wanted to mention is that the amendments are usually available during the duration of your action. This means that you normally have to request it before the end of the project. And this makes sense because you are not going to change a project that has already finalized, but there can be some exceptions. So in exceptional case, the amendments can be open also after the end of the project. And this is notably when there is a change in the coordinators or a change in the coordinator's bank account, because as you know, we make the payments to the coordinator's account. So if there is a change about that, it's important that we change it, even though the project has finalized, because we have to make the final payment. Next slide, please. I would like to explain some examples when an amendment is necessary and when no, and some common cases. Of course, there are many particular situations, but these are some common frequent cases that we see, and it is worth mentioning. Okay, so normally amendments are necessary when there are changes that concerns beneficiaries or affiliated entities. For instance, when there is an addition or termination of a beneficiary or an affiliated entity, this has to be reflected. The name will have to be updated in the preamble and in the list of participants in the datasheet of your grant agreement. And here, an important precision for the case of addition of participants for the beneficiary and the affiliated entity, they need to first register and get validated in the portal participant register if they have not done so. So if they have already the PIC, the participant identification code, this will not be necessary. Coordinator changes. So if you change the coordinator or there is a change in the bank account, this has to be reflected through an amendment. However, there are some amendments, some changes that do not need the amendments. For instance, if we change the name of the bank or the address, this will not need an amendment, but more precisely, if there is a change in the bank account number or in the IBAN, this will trigger the amendment. Any changes to Annex 1, meaning the description of your action, any significant change that will change the task, if there are task change removed, this has to be also reflected through an amendment. But here, an important reminder that any significant change to this action might call into question the decision awarding the grant. So this will be a case-by-case assessment. And I would always recommend that before introducing a substantive change to your Annex 1, you first consult your project officer. You can change the project schedule if you wish, the starting date, or project duration, this is allowed. And for the changes related to subcontracts or in-kind contributions free of charge, this is a special case where normally it is recommended that they go through an amendment, because this type of cost has to be explained in Annex 1 of your grant agreement. But here there is also allowed what we call the simplified approval procedure, meaning that in that case, if there is a change of a subcontract, for instance, which was not known at the moment of preparing your proposal, the beneficiary can ask for this ex post approval of cost that has been incurred for this unforeseen subcontracted without amendment. This is what we call the simplified approval procedure. However, if they will declare this cost afterwards in the reporting period, in the following period, the beneficiaries bear the risk that the granting authority will reject the cost. For this reason, we always recommend that if there is a change related to a new subcontract or to an in-kind contribution, it was always recommended to go through an amendment. Next slide. I will explain some changes for which normally the amendment is not necessary. And these would be notably budget transfers that are covered by the budget flexibility rule. This is a rule you will find in your model grant agreement in Article 5.5. And this rule means that the budget breakdown can be adjusted by transfers of budgets between participants or between categories, as long as this will not imply a substantive change to the description of your action. So this rule is based on the principle that your budget is an estimation. And therefore, in principle, it is allowed to shift a budget from participants or from categories if this is not very substantive and it will require a change of Annex 1, in which case an amendment is mandatory. So for instance, if there is an SME which is joining your grant agreement and this SME, it incorrectly budget the cost as cost for employees, this is not correct, but then the owner of the SME will realize that it can correct, it can transfer, it can move budget from one category to another and switch to the unit cost for SME owners. Another change that would normally not need an amendment is when you change the legal data of a participant, meaning the name of or the address. This can be done directly in the participant register. And another change that will normally not need an amendment is an universal takeover. This is the case of a merger or a full acquisition of a participant. So when there is a transfer of one participant, of one entity, and it's replaced by entirely by a new entity with all the rights and obligations, normally they don't need an amendment and they are done directly in the participant register. And as I said, normally changes in the bank name or address don't need an amendment either. But here we have an important disclaimer that even though there are changes that do not trigger an amendment, they will always call for what we call the information obligation. So all these changes will trigger the information obligation that the beneficiaries have towards the granting authority. And this is in Article 19.3 of the grant agreement. I hope that was clear. So these were the examples that I wanted to share with you, the frequent cases. But of course, for more guidance and for more information and where you can consult what type of changes are available for a amendment, I really recommend that you consult the guidance that is available in the Fundings and Tender portal. You have here the screenshot with the documents that you can consult. We have the annotated grant agreement. This is a guidance document for the participants where we have explained all the articles of your grant agreement. So here in Article 39, you will find explanations to what I just described in my presentation. But we also have what we call the amendment guide, and it's a public guidance where you could see all the type of amendments that exist and the clauses and the steps that need to be taken. You have here in the screen selected how you can find that. It's through the reference document tab. In the guidance, you will see those documents, and you can also consult the online manual in the Funding and Tenders portal, where you will find more information and more detailed examples of cases that would trigger an amendment or not. And up to here my presentation on the legal basis. I will now give the floor to my colleagues, and I will be happy to reply to your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Selene. We are receiving already quite a lot of questions for you, but we are going to answer them at the end of the next presentation. So we will have the two presentations about amendments together. So my name is Manuel Romaris. I'm training coordinator for Horizon Europe, and I will guide you now through the rest of the morning with the different presentations and the questions, of course. So the next presentation is about
how you prepare for that, what changes you introduce in the system, and how you prepare for that, what changes you introduce in the system, and tackle some frequently asked questions on changes in consortium composition. That would be the core of the presentation, after which I will summarize a bit what has been said and give you some takeaways. And at the very end, I will also leave you with some guidance documents, which you may refer to in your preparation of amendments. So, what are key business features of amendments? First of all, is a process cycle fully managed online and can be requested by both parties, so both by the consortium and by the EU. The time frame is rather large. You can submit your request at any point after the submission of the grant agreement, of the signature of the grant agreement, and before the end date of the project. That also includes the possibility of submitting an amendment request before the start date of the action. For example, if after grant agreement signature you realize that a mistake has been made or there have been unforeseen changes in the consortium that need an urgent change before the action starts. The process is also time-bound. You have as much time as you need to prepare the amendment, but after you have submitted it, or after the requesting party submitted it, be it the consortium or the EU, there is a 45 days time frame to sign or reject the amendment requests. Also, it's important to note that for consortium submitted requests, the approach should be a collaborative. All the consortium members should be informed and involved in the preparation of the amendment. However, only the coordinator can launch, sign, and submit the request. So it's really in the coordinator's hand to make sure that the rest of the consortium is informed and involved. In terms of structure of the amendment, as you have seen in the presentation before, it's a structured set of information and documents. First and foremost, it includes the changes to the grant agreement itself, which are encoded directly in the grants management system, the funding and tender portal. The request letter, which is a cover letter for your amendment, which lists all the changes that you are making, the reasons for them, and also all supporting documents which may want to include. The amendment core is then the legal document that lists all the clauses amending the agreements and the legal text. And then it may include any supporting documents which are required depending on the specific case, such as updated grant agreement datasheets or changed modified annexes. There is also the possibility to upload additional supporting documents which are not merged for signature. As you see here in the screenshot, you find them under the Documents tab. You do not have to submit them, but in case you have a space for uploading them. So before going into the step-by-step process, there are a few things that I would like to focus your attention on, because the amendment workflows is complex and can interact with other workflows as well. And one question that we often receive is, what is the interaction between the amendment request workflow and the reporting and payment one? Is it possible to submit an amendment request while there is a reporting and payment session open? So in general, the submission of an amendment is only blocked if the changes you want to introduce are related to the reporting periods, the action duration, and its starts and end dates. In all other cases, you can technically submit an amendment request even during a reporting and payment session. However, we would recommend you to wait for the end of the reporting period before submitting it and until the reception of the payment confirmation letter. This is because while the amendment request may not be blocked, the submission of the amendment may in turn block the reporting and payment process. So while normally this would not constitute a problem, this may create some complexities or some timing overlaps. So overall, we would really recommend you to wait. If that is not possible, please do consult with your project officer and inform them timely of the intention to submit an amendment to make sure that he can advise you on the best course of action and to avoid any complex situation and any issues that you may face along the road. Other questions that we do receive are whether it is possible to prepare two different amendments in parallel. For example, you have submitted an amendment and you already want to start preparing a second one because you have realized that other changes are needed. Technically, it is possible. However, again, it is not recommended. This is because, first of all, you can only submit the second amendment when the first one is either signed or rejected, so it will have to wait. And second of all, because the second amendment will not be able to read the data and changes from your first amendment, so it will not be up to date when it concerns the legal information, and the likelihood of having mistakes or not having the right information is quite high. Another question that we also receive quite frequently when it comes to the amendment process overall is whether the procedure for the amendment is the same, whether you have cost-based grants or lump sum grants. Here it's a bit easier. Yes, the procedure is the same. You do things exactly the same way. Now that we have a bit cleared the air on how you request an amendment and when you may want to request an amendment, let's look at the workflow in detail. This is a bit more detailed than what you have seen in the presentation before because we really go into step by step what has to be done for an amendment to be launched and up till the signature. So first of all, you launch the amendment, that's just requesting it in the system, and then you prepare it. You edit all, you make all the changes that you need to make to reflect the changes you need in your project. Once the preparation is complete, you lock it for review and you send it to the EU for the mandatory EU revision. The amendment is not signed yet. You just send it to us so that we can check whether the changes you want to make are admissible, are valid, or whether there are parts of the amendment missing. There are two outcomes of this revision. If there are parts missing or gravely mistaken, gravely wrong, your project officer will send the amendment back to you so you can again make changes and edit it and then resubmit it send it for review. Or if the review is positive and the amendment request is validated, this is not yet approved, it will go back to you, to the coordinator for signature, and then after signature for submission. After submission, it will come the assessment of the EU, so it is still possible that the amendment is rejected if it's not really admissible. And at the moment of signature, the 45 days will start, and the receiving party will have this time to either countersign or reject the amendment. As you see in the slide, you have two limits marked in the workflow. Those are the limit for cancellation and the limit for withdrawal. At any time before signature by the coordinator, it is possible to cancel the amendment request. And after signature by the coordinator, if you realize that a mistake has been made or you do not longer need an amendment, it is always possible to withdraw the amendment at any point before counter-signature by the EU. Cancellation and withdrawal are different and have different implications, and we will see that at the end of the workflow presentation. So what you do, how do you launch the amendment in practice? This is something only the primary coordinator contact can do. They have to log into the funding and tender program portal, go under My Projects, and in the action menu, they will find Manage Project, where they find all the grant management tools and information. There you can launch a new interaction with the EU, and you can request an amendment. The standard option would be to use the latest legal data, but in case you have recently submitted an amendment which has been either rejected or withdrawn, You will also be able to use the data from the rejected or withdrawn amendment as a basis for your new requests, and then you can make changes on top of them. Once the request has been launched, you will be able to access the tab to make changes to the grant agreement and to prepare the amendment. You will see in your metro line that the request is listed as launched. The tabs for the amendment requests are similar to, for example, those you had to fill in for the grant agreement preparation, with the difference that you will have an amendment information tab where you have two important features, the justification field and the amendment clauses. In the justification field, you have to list the changes you're making. Summarizing them, you have to list the reasons why you're requesting an amendment and making all the changes you have introducing, and also summarize the impact that this will have on the project. You will also have to list any supporting documents that you are attaching. This part will then become the core of the amendment request letter, which is one of the very important documents part of the amendment request. There is no standard template here because this really depends case by case what you may need, what changes you're introducing and what are the impacts on the project. In case you are unsure what to write, you can always contact your project officer for guidance, and then depending on the case, they should be able to help you in writing the most appropriate text. In the same page, you also will find a list of amendment clauses that will then constitute the amendment core. Those are grouped in two fields, mainly automatic and non-automatic ones. The automatic clauses are triggered automatically by changes in the data of the grant agreement. For example, if you change some information on the beneficiaries, maybe you terminate a beneficiary, add a beneficiary or an affiliated entity, or you change the project acronym, the amendment clauses corresponding to this change will automatically be checked by the system. However, there are also clauses that are not triggered automatically and that will have to be selected manually either by the coordinator or by the EU officers. And there is also special categories of clauses on demand, clauses 60 and 65 specifically, which are needed to change error or mistakes in the amendment, which are not listed in the normal clauses. So it's special cases. If there is a need to trigger them, the coordinator will inform the project officer, who will then introduce the on-demand clauses. You can find a list of all available amendments and their mandatory combinations in the amendment guide, so you can have a look there to get an understanding of what you may need for your specific case. It's really advised to consult that guide before drafting your request. Please be aware that an amendment may and often does include several amendment clauses, either because you want to introduce multiple changes in the same amendment, or because the change you are introducing has an effect on different parts of the grant agreement. For example, there is a change in beneficiaries, which also impacts the budget and the work plan. One special case is that of portability. For example, for ERC grants, when you may change your host institution and bring your grant with you. In previous program, there was a dedicated amendment clause for portability. This is no longer the case. This does not mean that portability is not possible. It's still possible, but it will have to be introduced through a set of different amendment clauses and not just through one. In case of doubts, you can always consult with your project officer and they will be able to give you all the guidance needed. Once the amendment is prepared, you have all the data changed, you can lock the amendment for review. You have the button in the right below the metro line. The metro line will go to prepared, and then you will be able to send the amendment for EU review. As mentioned, this is not yet the signature, this is not yet formal submission, it's just a check to see whether the amendment request is at all valid or if something is missing or has to be corrected. There are two possible outcomes. Either the review goes well and the request is validated. In that case, the layer will receive a notification to sign the amendment, or the EU notices that there is a need for revision, and then you will receive, the coordinator will receive a notification listing the reasons for rejection, listing the changes to be made, and it will be able to go back to amendment request preparation and then again lock it for review and send it for revision. And this ping pong can go on as many times as needed until the amendment request is considered valid. Please keep in mind that even if the request is validated, you may not be able to sign and submit it straight away. This is in the case you're adding a new beneficiary, for example, because in that case, the declaration of honor and the accession form must be signed before the amendment can be signed. Once the amendment is signed and submitted, you will have to wait for assessment and validation and possibly counter-signature or rejection by the EU. You will be able to follow through the process by the metro line, where you will also see how many days has passed since the request and how many days are remaining before the deadline. This is when you have the 45 days time limit for signature or rejection. If the amendment is signed, you will be notified and you will see all the process documents in the portal. If the amendment is rejected, you will receive a written notification within the 45 days deadline, and as mentioned, the rejected amendment can then be resumed as a basis for a new amendment request, including all the changes that will hopefully help you overcome the rejection. As mentioned before, there is also the option during the lifetime of the amendment request to either cancel or withdraw your request. Cancellation can be done before the amendment is signed by the coordinator. And once the request is cancelled, it will be moved to archive processes. It's important to note that once a request has been cancelled, it cannot be edited nor resumed. It's a dead file. On the other hand, you can also withdraw your request. This is done after signature by the coordinator and before counter-signature by the EU. If you withdraw your request, this will still be moved to the archive processes, but contrary to the cancellation, you will be able to resume the amendment request, edit it, and resubmit it. So this is more similar to a rejection case, so you can use it as a basis for a new request. In case of a EU-initiated amendment, obviously you will not have to do the preparation because that would be on the EU side. The coordinator representative will receive a notification when the amendment is signed and submitted by the EU with the request to sign it, or in disagreement, if in disagreement, to inform the EU of the reasons why there is no intention to sign within the 45 days deadline. This covered the preparation of the amendment, the launch, and a signature submission. Now, as promised before, we will look at a specific case of preparation of the amendment request for beneficiary termination, which is a quite frequent case with some specificities. So here we are in the preparation phase. We are introducing changes through the portal. Beneficiary termination is normally amendment clause 4. One thing that is important to notice is that if there are affiliated entities to the beneficiary which you wish to terminate, they are automatically removed at the time of beneficiary termination. So there will be at the same time an amendment clause 6, which is the termination of affiliated entities without you having to introduce a separate change. Normally, other clauses which come with beneficiary termination are 21 and 41, which refer to the change of annexes. Once the beneficiary is terminated, you will have to define the exit date. The exit date is the last date in which the beneficiary, which is terminated, will do work for the projects and will be able to claim costs on work for the project. You have a choice on what this date is, and you have 3 possible options. Either you choose a fixed date that can be both in the past or in the future, or you decide that the exit date will be the day after the submission of the amendment request, or the date of entry into force of the amendment. This is up to your choice, but be aware that after the exit date has been chosen, the system will automatically calculate a termination date, that is the date of entry into force of the termination. This, as mentioned, is automatically calculated, and it would be either the fixed date that you've chosen as exit date, if that is in the future, or the date of entry into force of the amendment, whichever is the latest. Another thing specific to beneficiary termination is that you will be requested to upload the opinion letter of the living beneficiary stating his opinion on the reasons why he left the project. Also, the beneficiary termination will trigger the termination reporting process, both technical and financial, which mirrors to an extent the reporting and payment process and will only be referred to the living beneficiary. This process will have to be completed by the living beneficiary and the coordinator. This was for the beneficiary termination, but changes in consortium are overall very frequent changes. There are a number of points to pay attention to. For example, a lot of questions concern the possibility to include affiliated entities during the project. It is always possible to introduce a request to that effect, but that will have to be through an amendment. And one important point is that amendments, as mentioned, can be granted or rejected. So any addition of affiliated entities or other entities will have to be assessed by the EU, who will check the admissibility of the request. Here on the slide you can find a list of amendment clauses and the supporting documents and information that may be included for this kind of requests. Another question that we receive quite frequently is whether beneficiaries can be added with an effective date in the past before the submission of the amendment. This is possible, same as with the beneficiary termination, as the exit date could be retroactive, the starting date could also be retroactive. Do discuss this case with your project officer though, because as mentioned for the previous point, the amendment request may be rejected if it is found inadmissible. So that may pose a risk for you in terms of project management if you introduce a beneficiary which may or may not be accepted by the EU. So in case you have any doubts, do check with your project officer, which will be able to tell you whether there are possible admissibility issues. Another question that we receive is concerning associated partners. Do we have to notify the EU if an associated partner leaves after the grant agreement is signed? And how we do it, is it enough to have a formal notification? No, that's not enough. The moment the grant agreement is signed, an amendment is necessary to remove an associated partner. And again, in the slides you can find the minimum amendment clauses that you will have to introduce. Other common questions or attention points are related to universal takeover and transfer of rights and obligation. This has been partially covered by the presentation before, but as a reminder, in case of partial transfer of rights and obligation, you have to introduce an amendment request with a list of amendment clauses and information provided in the slides. If the request of amendment is due to a PTRO, please do specify that in the request letter and do mention it to the project officer while discussing with them the preparation of the amendment. You can also find in the annotated grant agreement different examples of cases of partial transfer of rights and obligations. On the other hand, if this is a matter of universal takeover, a merger or a full acquisition, the change in principle concerns only the legal information of the participant. An amendment is not needed unless you want to introduce other changes, and the standard information procedure applies. So you just have to modify the data of your organization as registered in the participant register and then provide the required supporting documents. Once the change is validated by us, the portal will automatically see the new data and you will be able to see in the grant management tool the new information of the beneficiary without a need for an amendment. So this was the core of my presentation. Here are some summaries of what we have discussed and some takeaways messages. First of all, do check out the guidance material and reference documents in advance. Make sure that you are very clear what you want to change and how you want to change it, which different clauses you may want to introduce, and which supporting documents you may need. And do collaborate with the project officer, because they are there to guide you, they are there to help you, and they do have the better overview of the situation and will be able to guide you and help you decide whether the amendment is indeed needed or not, what is the better timeline for that, and if there are any potential overlaps with other concurring workflows. Do avoid belated requests. Be always in time and start an amendment request as soon as you believe it is necessary, because the process can take some time. And as we have discussed, you can have a ping pong with the project officer before the request is validated. So be sure that you don't wait for the last minute. Prepare lean requests and use a concise and clear language in the formulation, especially of the justification, making sure all the changes you want to introduce and all the reasons for the changes and impact are listed in a clear and concise manner. Before leaving you here, I wanted to leave you some links to useful guidance documents. Some of them has been mentioned before. You will find the guide, the online manuals to amendment, the how-to on how to launch an amendment from a technical point of view, the amendment guide listing, among others, all the amendment clauses, and the annotated model grant agreement, where you find all the relevant information on how to manage your grant. This was my presentation, and I now remain at your disposal for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Just to remind everybody that the presentations are already available on the website of the event since yesterday, so you can check them there and, of course, go to the links that Beatrice was mentioning. So for the questions, we will have now not only Selene and Beatrice, but we have also two other colleagues that are Bartosz MAJEWSKI and for the legal part, and Petros BELSIS for the business process part. By the way, they will be the ones presenting later on the reporting part. So let's start with the questions. First question we have is, do we need an amendment for changes in the description of action, like date of delivery or number of person month of partners?
I believe this is more for the legal colleagues. So.
Selene?
Yeah.
For the date of the
Maybe I can start.
Yeah, please do.
So yeah, for any changes affecting the description of your action in Annex 1 of your grant agreement, as I explained during my presentation, we would need to assess whether the change is substantive or not, and whether it will call into the question the decision awarding the grant. So normally, for changing the number of person months in a work package, normally this would fall under the budget flexibility rule that I explained. So for instance, if during your project you realize that in certain work package you need more effort, more human effort than in other, you can transfer these person months without the amendment. But you will have to see if you are changing the description of the action, if you are also changing task with this change of person months. And concerning the date of submission of a delivery, it's the same. We would need to assess whether it's a substantive delay in the submission of your delivery, because this may also affect the task description of your action. And in any case, if you are experiencing already a substantive delay to submit a delivery, you may also consider that it might be necessary to amend the project schedule of your project, because you are already noticing that you are quite late with the deliverables. So it will depend on the type of change and whether it's substantive or not. And as we were saying during the presentations, the best practice is to consult your project officer about this type of change.
A tool you can ask The project officer just needs to confirm. You don't have to launch a process. Of course, this will not be reflected in the documents, but in order just to facilitate for small delays, because as Selene explained, if you encounter some real difficulty, then it needs to be assessed. But if it is, let's say, a delay of 1 week or something like that, then the project officer in the system, they can approve. Of course, if you really want to reflect the change, you need to do an amendment. But if not, you can proceed like that, so it doesn't require, in that case, an amendment in the system management.
Thank you, Selene. Thank you, Petros. Next question is what to do if you cannot reach your project officer?
Well, you should be able to reach your project officer. One advice there is do not only send your request via mail personally to them, do introduce them through the portal. In that way, your message will be accessible to all the team managing the grants. If you really cannot reach your project officer team through that stage, you can always go through the portal to the research inquiry service, and then your message will be forwarded to the most appropriate service, so you will receive a reply as soon as possible, also based on the urgency of the message.
Thank you very much. Is the amendment process applicable to all Horizon Europe actions? I think that, Selene, is for you.
Yes, in principle, the amendment, it's applicable to all Horizon Europe grants because we use the same model grant agreement, and there you will find the legal provisions in Article 39. So yes, it's the same process for all the actions.
And the next question is also for you, Selene. It's an amendment required when transferring budget between partners. Some project officers do request that.
Yes, normally transferring budget between partners would be covered by the budget flexibility rule, unless, of course, you are making a substantive change in the description of your action. So you really have to ask yourself, am I only changing the budget because I realize that I would need more budget in this category, or am I also changing task? It will depend on the type of change, and if it will also entail a change of task as such. So if you are also changing the description of your action, because for instance you are changing substantive budget for equipment that you will not do anymore, we will need to assess whether this would change the description of the action of your project. But normally budget transfers between members of the consortium would be covered by the budget flexibility.
Thank you. The next question, how do amendment requests differ between actual cost and lump sum projects, especially for the transfer of person month between work packages? Who would like to answer this one?
So for the lump sum, I think I would firstly direct you to watch a specific webinar for the Horizon Europe implementation days that we had in October, on the 17th of October. And there it was explained the process for amendments in the lump sum grant. But just briefly to say that the procedure between actual cost grants and lump sum grants, it's the same. We have the same Article 39. The only difference and the only specification that I would like to make, it's that for the work packages that have been completed and are paid, there cannot be amendments anymore because it is considered done, paid, so you cannot change it. For the rest, the procedure would follow the same steps and we have the same legal basis. But again, I really recommend that you watch the specific webinar on the lump sums. Today we were focusing on the actual cost.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, all our webinars are in the portal, actually, in the Funding and Tenders portal. So you can always go there to see the previous webinars, not only the video transcription, but also the presentations and download them. So next question. What is considered principle of equal treatment in the amendment process? And Selene, I think that's for you too.
Yes, so I would explain this is a general principle we have in all EU grants. It's the principle of equal treatment of applicants. It means that at the moment of application, before submitting your application, all the interested participant has to be granted with the same equal conditions. What does it mean? It means that all the applicants would submit the proposal with the same conditions, and then they will be evaluated on the basis of that. What we say that an amendment cannot breach this principle is that if you want to introduce a change afterwards, while you have already been awarded the grant and you are already running your project, and you will introduce a change that if it were known at the time of the application, it would grant you a more favorable treatment or a discrimination with regards to other applicants, this cannot be accepted. For instance, if the description of the topic, this project is about, I don't know, constructing a big prototype, and this is public and it's described in the call conditions to all applicants, and you prepare your proposals on the basis of that, and you describe that you have certain equipment that is very valuable to reach this objective, to build this prototype in your action. But then you are awarded the grant, and then during the project, you decide to introduce an amendment to remove this particular feature that you had, and that it was very important for the evaluators to give you this award decision. This cannot be accepted, because then you would be in a more favorable position of the rest of the applicants. So I hope it was clear, but it means equal conditions at the time of application.
Thank you, Selene. What is a substantive change? What is the limit, for instance, in the budget category shift?
I think this question refers whether there is a certain limit, a certain percentage of change that we accept or not. And for instance, when it comes to budget flexibility, there is no fixed percentage of budget or an amount that you can transfer. What we use and what we assess is whether there is substantive, in the sense that it would change the description of your action, it would change the task, the scope of the project. There is not a legal definition as such. That's why we say it has to be assessed case by case, but there is no fixed limit, there is no percentage. It would need to be assessed on the basis of the change that wants to be introduced and the description of the action on which you were granted the funding. Yeah.
Thank you, Selene. I think next question about amendments in lump sum you have already answered. Unless you want to add something else, we are going to the following question then. Thank you. Is it necessary, to submit an amendment in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie program, or is enough to explain the situation in the final report? That's for you, Selene.
For MCA, I'm afraid I'm not an expert about this specific type of action. So I would prefer, if you have a specific question, a specific case on amendments to the MCA PF, you submit it in writing or you consult your project officer, because I'm not expert in this part of the program.
It depends also, because it's not clear what kind of amendment. You know, the postdoctoral fellowship has also specific rules concerning, you know, the two institutions, the exchange, then the calculation of the working experience. I think it needs to be 8 years, and then you also need to, of course, to be already having a postdoctoral degree in order to be applicable. So if it is about changes in the persons or anything, of course, it has to be assessed. So these kind of questions that are very specific, and you know, we cannot also assess the question, you need to submit them through, well, first consult your project officer. If you also have some generic question on specific things, you need to go through the help desk, and then we can assess it.
Thank you both. The next question, I think, Beatrice, you have already answered something similar. I don't know if you want to go back. Why a beneficiary cannot have direct discussion with the project officer to explain context of a specific amendment?
So that's normally to simplify communication. All context in the project has to go through the coordinator, because that's his role to coordinate the project to be involved. If the coordinator deems it important that the beneficiary has a voice, it is possible that a meeting between coordinator, beneficiary and project officer is organized, but that's in exceptional cases. Normally your coordinator should be able to do the job, also because anyhow it's the coordinator that can introduce the amendment request, is not the beneficiary itself. So the work on the amendment request will always and only be between the coordinator and the project officer.
Thank you. The next question. Once the amendment process is started in the Funding and Tenders portal, is there an established period for the first informal review by the Commission?
No, from the legal perspective, there is no deadline established for the informal assessment by the granting authority. This is a step that we introduced because it is considered, it facilitates afterwards the assessment of the amendment formally, and we recommend that we have this informal review step. However, the legal deadline starts to count only as of the official submission of the amendment request, which is 45 days.
Thank you. The next question, I think, is also for you, Selene. If an affiliated entity is merged with the beneficiary, does this situation need an amendment?
Here, it will depend on the specific case, because this can be the case of a universal takeover, a universal full merger, or a partial takeover. So in the case of the universal takeover, where the entity is fully absorbed, it's fully merged with the other beneficiary, the amendment is not necessary. However, there can be the case also of a partial takeover, and this will always trigger an amendment.
About the Maria Slowowska-Curie actions, do you want to add something, or should we go to the following question?
I think it's best to contact the project officer or the research inquiry service for the MSCA specific questions.
Thank you, Selene. Next question. What can we do if the granting authority does not answer 45 days after the PO receives last additional document?
Here, I would start, and maybe my colleagues from the business process can complement. But from the legal perspective, as I explained, after the expire of the 45 days deadline from receiving the additional documents, if the granting authority has not explicitly replied, it means that it can be considered that the amendment is rejected. So there is no tacit approval. Again, the best practice is to get in touch with your project officer in that scenario.
Thank you. Next question. Thank you, Petros. Next question. If changing a budget between partners, for instance, a minor change in direct cost or travel, where should that be reflected? In the portal?
So minor change of budget, this would be covered by the budget flexibility rule, and it can be reflected in the electronic tool, but I think my colleague Petros can explain it better.
Yes, you can introduce it during the reporting when you will claim after the reporting period expires, then you can claim the cost there, so you can reflect there this change. Of course, considering that it is falling under the preconditions that we mentioned earlier, so that there is no substantial change or there is no transfer of tasks. In that case, you can define it during the reporting period.
Thank you, Petros and Selene. Next question. If an amendment can only be accepted in full or rejected in full, would it make sense to separate the content of the amendments and apply for two different amendments?
That is indeed possible. That's an option. It really depends on the situation. So I would advise you to consult with your project officer. The reminder I want to give is what was also discussed during the presentation. You cannot submit 2 amendments at the same time. You can have them prepared at the same time, though that's not really recommended because there may be discrepancies on the legal data. And you can only submit the second amendment once the first one is either signed or rejected. So keep that in mind, but in principle it is possible to split the amendment in multiple ones. Do consult with your project officer before deciding what is the best course of action in your specific case.
Thank you. The next question is not really related to amendments, but maybe, Selene, you want to give it a try. The grant agreement is signed by only the beneficiaries or also associated partners?
This one is easy.
Yeah, so the grant agreement actually it's signed only by 2 parties, the granting authority on the one side and the coordinator on the other side. And then the beneficiaries accede to the grant agreement through the accession form. But the 2 signatory parties are the granting authority and the coordinator. And associated partners, they do not need to sign the grant agreement, nor they are requested to sign accession forms. So they are considered third parties to the grant agreement and they don't have to sign it.
They don't have access to the portal also. So, you know.
Thank you. Next question. Can I shift travel event budget to another partner around 10,000 euros to facilitate the organization of a training in the context of, again, the Marie Sklodowska-Curie? Should we leave this one out?
We can leave it out, but for the travels, I would just like to say more generally, not specific to MSCA, but if you are making budget transfers between travels, you will also, again, have to assess if this will affect the description of your action, because maybe this trip was very important in your project, and it was an event that it was an action task. So normally, yes, you can shift travel cost between partners. But again, let's assess whether this would mean that you would also change the action task and this travel was really necessary for your action. But normally, I would say that shifting budget for travels would be falling under the budget flexibility rule.
Thank you. The questions are switching, are dancing a little bit. So it's an amendment required if there is a work package leader change between beneficiaries for one work package.
The answer is yes.
So,
I mean, you need to do an amendment. It's not automatic in the tool, so you need to define it. It requires also a change in the annex, so you need to do an amendment, yes, if you want to reflect the change in the work package later.
Thank you, Petros. Next question. What is meant by formal submission? Last time we looked for review. Our PO took more than 4 months to review it. Who can we contact in that case? We have answered already that. You want to add something else?
The formal 45 days deadline starts at the moment of signature and submission, so that does not include the review part. If you cannot get in touch with your project officer, do contact the EU through the portal, through the help desk or the research inquiry service, and then we will try to see what can be done in your case.
Thank you. Next question. Is an amendment necessary if more person months are reported due to different salary rates from the initial proposal, or can this be explained in the technical report? Selene?
Normally changes, this would be a change on the person months due to different salary rates. I assume you mean you want to report more person months and more personal cost. Here, this could fall under budget flexibility rule. Indeed, you have to report that in your next reporting. However, here I would like to make an important precision is that if you make budget transfers, in any case, the maximum grant amount of your grant agreement cannot be increased. So please bear in mind that indeed the salaries may change, but the maximum grant amount, which is the amount maximum which can be payable from the granting authority to you, this cannot be increased. So all the budget transfers need to be done within this ceiling.
Thank you. The next question. For institutional changes of a beneficiary, is first step to change in the participant register and only ask for an amendment if the validation system says so?
I can take that if you want.
Yeah, please.
Yes, indeed. It depends also on the change, because we explained there are different changes. If it is a change in the address or the VAT number or the bank account, then yes, there are some kind of automatic amendments. So if you change the legal name or the VAT, there will be this what we call information procedure. So once it is validated, the system automatically will update. Now, if it is another kind of a change, as we said, there is the merging, a full merge, or there is a partial transfer of rights, which that is more complex, so there are different amendment clauses. So it all depends to the change. But yes, indeed, you have to start from participant register. If the validation team says the change is not approved, then there will be nothing that you can do. You cannot manually go and override the system.
Thank you, Petros. Next question. Is there another example for when an amendment is necessary and approved after the end of the project? Who would like to take this one?
Maybe it's, well, I don't know, it's also a case by case. I mean, you know, there are changes also that can happen, as Selene explained, you know, the change of coordinator. I mean, it could be also, we have seen there are also changes that need to reflect on budget shifting between, let's say, different categories that should go through an amendment. But all these are exceptional and mostly are managed manually. So, I mean, you know, you really need to, we cannot now assess your case by just, you know, in just 1 minute. Most of them, they also sometimes need also to be reviewed by the legal team to see what can be done. So all these are exceptional cases. So I don't think we need to insist more on giving these kind of examples here. You always need to contact your project officer, and then it has to arrive also many times to the legal teams to assess what has to be done.
Thank you, Petros. Next question. What is the procedure when the coordinator is taking over and the universal transfer of rights and obligations cannot be initiated before the end of the project? Selene, you want to give it a try?
Yeah, here it's a very specific case. So we will need to assess all the elements. Notably, I don't understand why the UTRO cannot be initiated before the end of the project, but I would say as preliminary assessment that any change of a coordinator would require the amendment, because as I said, this is the important contact point for the granting authority, and if there is a change to this entity, notably to its bank account, we would need to know. And in any case, this type of situation, they also trigger the information obligation that I explained in Article 19 of your grant agreement. So if you know that there is going to be a universal takeover before the end of the action, you have the obligation to inform the granting authority about this change, and then there we will assess what is the procedure from there.
Thank you, Selene. We are now approaching the end of our time. We have still time for a few questions. The next one is an amendment. Yeah, is an amendment required if a subcontractor contributing scientific task changes, although the change would not change the work plan?
It's a specific case as well, so we would need to assess all the elements. I understand from the question that this subcontractor was foreseen. The subcontractor was foreseen in the description of your action. It was mentioned in Annex 1, and you had already foreseen this subcontracting, but now it will contribute two other tasks that will not change the work plan. In this case, we will need to assess because, as I said, subcontracting, it's a budget category that requires as an eligibility criteria that it's mentioned in Annex 1. So it would depend if you already foresaw this type of subcontracting task in your project or not. And then we will need to see if the change would be substantial as to trigger the amendment or not. I don't have sufficient information to provide a reply.
Thank you, Selene. Next question, is an amendment needed in the section payments of the grant agreement if there is written that the coordinator will have two payments in total, but in the consortium agreement, the coordinator decided to make more interim payments?
No. So the grant agreement refers to the payment that the EU does to the project, to the coordinator, that how the coordinator redistributes the payment to the different beneficiaries and whether they want to have more interim payments in between is a matter for the consortium to decide through the consortium agreement. So if the consortium has agreed together that the payment will be done in different steps, that's possible and does not go through the amendment. That's a consortium business. That's not something that is of interest to us from a standpoint, legally standpoint at least.
Thank you. And now we are going to the last question because it's 11 already. So if a beneficiary changes the bank coordinator, I need an amendment, not only if the coordinator changes them?
I don't understand very well the question. The bank coordinates, meaning the address, maybe?
I think, Selene, they are asking if one of the beneficiaries that is not coordinator changes a bank account, if there is an amendment needed. And the answer is no, because for us, the important bank account is the one for the coordinator. So we do payments to the coordinator, and then the coordinator has necessity. They are obliged to redistribute the amounts to the rest of the beneficiaries. So if you change the bank account, you need also to be in contact with the coordinator so that you ensure that the transfers are correct. And of course, be very vigilant to the way you communicate. We have posted also information. So please make sure that you ensure with the coordinator, either through also other channels, to ensure that the bank accounts are the ones that should be transferred, and not only by an email that they might receive who says, I just changed my bank account, please transfer the money there. So you need to be also careful in cases of fraud. And when there is the time to transfer the amount from the coordinator to the beneficiaries, please make sure also with secure channels that the beneficiary will be, the bank account of the beneficiary is the correct one.
Thank you very much, Petros. Thank you all for your questions. We don't have more time. Thank you for the answers too. We are going now to start the reporting part, actually reporting and payments. The first presentation will be about the legal basis, avoiding common errors. And for that, we have a lawyer from the Common Implementation Center, Bartosz MAJEWSKI. I think he is there. I cannot see him.
Yes.
So,
hello,
Bartosz,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good morning. My name is Bartosz MAJEWSKI, and I'm a legal officer in Common Legal Support Service in DG LTD. And today I will explain the details of the reporting and payment obligations arising from Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement. My presentation, next slide, please. My presentation will be structured in two parts. First, I will focus on reporting obligations, and later we will shift our attention to a matter that is much more pleasant, as I believe everyone enjoys receiving payments. So my focus will be on the legal perspective, while Petros will demonstrate how to manage the reporting from an IT perspective using the Funding and Tenders portal. As you might expect, these two topics, reporting and payments, are interlinked because information provided during the reporting will also impact the payment phase. And regarding the legal basis, we refer to Articles 21 and 22 of the Model Grant Agreement. Another important information is that today we will concentrate only on actual cost reporting obligation, and we will not cover the lump sum reporting as it is very different. And the aim of this presentation is to reduce the number of errors and to provide you with all necessary information. Therefore, you can use the Slido to ask the questions, and we will reply to the most voted ones after Petros' presentation. So let's begin with the reporting obligation. On the slide, you can see that there are two different reporting modules: continuous reporting and periodic reporting. Continuous reporting module is open throughout the action duration, throughout the whole action duration, where beneficiaries should regularly update on certain elements. Periodic reporting is quite different, as this module is open at specific time during the grant implementation. Beneficiaries will need to describe the work conducted during the reporting period and report on the cost incurred during the reporting period. These two types of reporting are interlinked, meaning that what you include in the continuous reporting will be used also during the periodic reporting. And understanding the differences between these two types of reporting is crucial to avoid errors. Can we move to the next slide, please? So let's talk about the details of those two types of reporting. For continuous reporting, you must provide regular updates on elements such as deliverables, milestones, critical risks that you have foreseen in your proposal, or the new risks discovered during the implementation of the action. You have to report on IPR, communication, dissemination, and other components using the IT tool provided in Funding and Tenders portal. This should be done regularly and also as soon as possible and in accordance with the timing outlined in your proposal. Petros will later show you more about how this looks in the system and what kind of information is required during the continuous reporting. Now we can move to periodic reporting, which, as I mentioned, can be only done at certain point of the action after the reporting period has ended. The timing of reporting periods may vary for different actions. You may have the reporting period that lasts for 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months. Every time you need to check that in the system or in your model grant agreement. And periodic reporting consists of two parts: the technical part, which includes two parts. Part A, which is technical information already filled in during the continuous reporting, and part B, which is a narrative section that you must upload as PDF in the periodic report module. The financial part of the periodic report involves reporting on the costs incurred during the reporting period. And there are two types of the financial parts of the periodic reports. In some projects, there is additional pre-financing, and then you will need to provide in the financial part just a statement on the use of the previous pre-financing payment. In such cases, the coordinator must declare that certain percentage of the previous pre-financing has been used based on the data provided by the beneficiaries. This information is necessary for the granting authority to determine the amount of additional pre-financing to be sent to the coordinator. But as I said, the additional pre-financing is used very rarely. Now, regarding the interim and final reporting, For both, you must report on the cost incurred in the entire reporting period, including the periods covered by the additional pre-financing in your financial statement. Each beneficiary must prepare an individual financial statement, and also they are responsible for preparing the financial statements for their affiliated entities. The coordinator, based on individual statements, must compile a consolidated financial statement on behalf of the entire consortium. And additionally, beneficiaries must report on the use of resources to provide the cost explanations. Only when reporting before the final payment, some beneficiaries may need to submit the certificate of financial statements, so-called CFS. And this certificate is necessary only if a beneficiary has reached the threshold outlined in the grant agreement. So the standard threshold for requested EU contribution is 430,000 euro. You can download the CFS template from the Funding and Tenders portal from the Reference Documents tab. And if you have the questions regarding the CFS, I would like to invite you to watch one of our previous webinars on this topic, which took place on June 26, few months ago. It's available in the Funding and Tenders portal or our YouTube channel. Next slide, please. Now I would like to offer some additional insights on reporting. So regarding the timing, in your grant agreement, you will find the datasheet summarizing various aspects of your grant agreement. And section 4 is dedicated to modalities and schedule of reporting and payments. The first point addresses the continuous reporting, and the second point pertains to periodic reporting. And concerning the currency of your financial statement, you must always report your cost in euros, even if your accounting is in a different currency. If you are using the different currency, then you need to convert all your costs to euros using a single exchange rate based on the average daily exchange rate published in the official journal of the European Union, calculated over the corresponding reporting period. It's not that difficult because in the annotated model grant agreement, you can find a link to the tool that helps you to establish this conversion rate. And you apply this one rate to all your costs. As for the reporting language, according to the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement, reporting must be done in the language of the agreement. To my knowledge, there are no Horizon Europe grant agreements signed in a language other than English. So generally, this would be English. Next slide, please. Of course, you must be aware of the consequences of non-compliance. So in accordance with Article 21.5, the granting authority may suspend the action if the report does not comply with the rules of this article and may implement other measures outlined in Chapter 5. And if the coordinator fails to fulfill its reporting obligations, then the granting authority may terminate the grant or participation of the coordinator. Additionally, as I mentioned before, the granting authority may also impose measures described in Chapter 5, and these decisions are taken by the granting authority based on the case-by-case assessment. So it's always assessed by the Commission. Next slide, please. Okay, now we can move on to much more pleasant topic, payments. Payments are usually linked with the reporting, with the first pre-financing payment being the exception, as it is paid at the start of the action, and its amount is set at the grant agreement preparation level. And we can change the slide. Thanks. Let's begin with the general information about the payments. As I mentioned earlier, you can find the details about the payment schedule in the datasheet of your grant agreement. In the section 4.2, it provides the information on when the payments should be made by the granting authority. To whom all the payments are made to coordinator's bank account. Since reporting is done in euros, payments will also be made in euros. And the consortium must decide how to distribute the payments among themselves. So the only general rule is that the coordinator must distribute the payments without unjustified delay. And how the funds are shared among the partners is an internal matter of the consortium, and this should be described in your consortium agreement. So all the payments going to from the Commission go to the coordinator, who then distribute the payments according to your consortium agreement. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows a screenshot of the datasheet. Here you can see the information about the start and the end of the reporting periods, the type of the reporting, whether it is a additional pre-financing or standard interim report, the type of the payment, and the deadlines for both reporting and the payments. The standard deadline for interim reports is 60 days after the end of the reporting period. There are several types of payments: pre-financing, optional, additional pre-financing, interim payments, and the final payment. The standard deadline for the pre-financing is 30 days from entry into force of the grant agreement, or 10 days before the starting date, whichever is the latest. For interim and final payments, the standard deadline is 90 days from receipt of the periodic report. For additional pre-financing, the standard deadline is 60 days from receipt of the additional pre-financing report. And the reason for the shorter deadline for the additional pre-financing payment is that the financial part of the report is very basic. As I mentioned previously, it consists only on the statement coming from the coordinator. We can move to the next slide. Okay, pre-financing is a payment at the beginning of the action to provide beneficiaries with the funds to start the action smoothly. It remains the property of European Commission of European Union until the final payment. As already stated, this payment does not require reporting, as it is made at the beginning of the action. And also, as I said, it may be sent 30 days from the grant agreement's entry into force, or 10 days before the starting date, whichever is the later. So these are the deadlines for the granting authority to follow. In some projects, there is additional pre-financing. Then we will ask you to provide information during the reporting on the percentage of the initial pre-financing used by the consortium. And if the percentage is less than 70%, there will be a reduction by the difference between 70% and the amount used. As the amount of the pre-financing and additional pre-financing is set at the grant agreement preparation stage, if you haven't used the 70% of initial pre-financing, then the amount of additional pre-financing may be lower than the amount set out in the grant agreement. Can we move on to the next slide? Regarding interim payments, you will need to provide us with individual financial statements. You must explain your costs incurring the reporting period, and as a granting authority, we will calculate the total accepted EU contribution based on your financial statements, and we will send this amount within 90 days of receiving the periodic report. There is a ceiling that we will take into account, that the sum of the interim payments and pre-financing cannot exceed 90% of the maximum grant amount. Thus, at least 10% remains for the final payment. Considering that 5% is paid to the mutual insurance mechanism, so-called MIM, you can receive up to 85% in total before the final payment. Can we move to the next slide? Moving to the final payment, the amount of the final payment depends on the total accepted EU contribution. And the payment cannot exceed the maximum grant amount. If you report cost higher than the maximum grant amount, which of course is possible, you will not receive more than the maximum grant amount. Additionally, the no profit rule is another factor considered when calculating the final payment. So if you have any revenues, they should be taken into account in the final payment calculation. The general rule is that the action must not generate the profit. For details about the calculation, please refer to the annotation to Article 22.3. The balance, so the amount to be paid or recovered, will equal to the final grant amount minus the payments already made to the consortium, so pre-financing plus interim payments. And if the resulting amount is positive, the final grant amount, which means that the final grant amount is higher than the payments made, then the granting authority will pay the difference as the final payment. And if the result is negative, so the final grant amount is lower than the payments made, then the final payment will take the form of a recovery, and the consortium will need to repay the excess EU contribution received. One more specific case that I would like to tell you about is in the event of the termination of one of the beneficiaries during the action, the affected beneficiary must prepare a termination report, including the individual financial statement and information about the amount received from the coordinator. This is the part of the amendment procedure that must be initiated in the event of beneficiary termination. And the granting authority will calculate the balance between the accepted cost and the amounts paid by the coordinator. And again, if the balance is positive, the payment will be made, but together with the next payment to the consortium. So the leaving beneficiary will have to wait for the payment until the time of the next payment according to the payment schedule of set out in the grant agreement. If the balance is negative, then the Commission will initiate a recovery procedure in accordance with Article 22.2. And next slide, please. Oh, okay. So thank you for your attention, and I hope this presentation has been helpful for you, and looking forward to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Bartosz. Actually, as before, we are going to have the two presentations about reporting together, and we will answer all questions at the same time in half an hour, more or less. So the next presentation is also about reporting and payments, is the business process and the IT tool also. And we have again with us here Petros BELSIS, who is a policy officer at the Common Implementation Center of the European Commission. Petros?
Thank you. You can.
Yeah.
The slides, please.
We still don't have the slides. They are working on that. Perfect, thank you. You can go.
Thank you. So yes, welcome. So now we are going to present the reporting, how it works through the tools and the business, let's say, aspects. So the basic principles, of course, you had before the presentation. From our side, we just need to present. So there is an obligation. So the Commission needs to monitor the activities of the projects in order to assess and verify two things. One is that the implementation of the action goes as is described in the description of the action. And the second has to do with, of course, the eligibility of the costs that you claimed and the payments that are following. In order to verify that the project is implemented properly, so the beneficiaries, they must submit any information requested, and of course, in particular, the deliverables and the reports that are detailed in the grant agreement. So, monitoring the implementation of the project is a continuous task. So, this is something also that you will also need to support. So by providing information that is requested through the tools, through the different modules of the reporting tool that we will also explain. And of course, there are key contractual tasks that are defined in the project life, particularly when the reporting period ends, where you have to submit specific information and reports that are also linked to the payments that you will receive. So in order to support the project officers also, because of the variety of and the specialty of each activity, the detailed needs of which need to be assessed, there are organized review meetings which are assisted by experts. So the project officers are assisted by external experts who facilitate let's say, the validation of the tasks that have been performed. So here, what takes place, let's say, is that there are specific, as we said, reporting periods that are defined also in the datasheet of the grant agreement, and the periods also that the duration also in the starting date, they are also depending on the type of action. But what we also need to because we receive sometimes questions from you, there is also a kind of possibility. So especially during the grant agreement preparation, but even later through an amendment, you can also discuss with your project officer and of course define if you want to let's say, differentiate a little, so that sometimes we receive the question that, look, my reporting period falls within the summer vacation for most of the participants, so it is a little difficult. So in that case, if you really think, you can extend or, move it a little advance or forward a little the reporting periods in order to accommodate also your needs. But in principle, most of the project, for example, starts in specific dates like the first of the year, so that the payment also to pre-financing can be done immediately. And then the duration is depending on the time of the project, either within 12 months or after 18 months, which is the standard. So now we have the main concept is that of course, you need to submit deliverables and report on the milestones or the outputs, also update on the risks that you have already defined during the submission of the proposal and the grant agreement preparation. And then we have the periodic reports, which has to be done at the end of a period, what we define as a period in the grant agreement. And then within these 60 days, you need to submit all the corresponding evidence and documents that are required. And after you submit the report, there will be, of course, organized a review, and then it can be done through a payment. The periodic reports consist of two parts. There is a technical part, and then there is also a financial part where you claim the costs. So now, at the final payment, depending also on the amount of that the beneficiary has claimed, what they have received, you may need to submit financial statements if you have exceeded the threshold. So this threshold is for Horizon Europe 430,000, and for specific beneficiaries which have been through the specific accreditation audit process, this amount can be even higher. But this concerns only specific beneficiaries with participating in many projects and receiving a lot of funding, so they go through a specific audit process in advance, and then the ceiling, let's say, for submitting this additional cost can be higher. But okay, this is specific for limited cases. All the submissions go through the portal, so we do not need to submit any documents. So here, let's say we can see we have two modules, as we explained. We will also go through the details through each of one of them. So on the first, you see with a orange, let's say, line. So we have the continuous reporting module, which opens immediately after the signature of the grant agreement, and there you can continuously provide specific details and update with the data that you receive and you produce from your project. And then there are the periods that we have defined also in the grant agreement, and at the end of each period you need to submit what we call the periodic report. At the end there is the final one that, of course, it will consist in the final payments and the clearing of the amounts that you have reported during all of the action. So, going into a little more detail, the continuous reporting module contains of different sections. So there is the project summary section where we will explain also through a screen. You have to provide specific details that will be also published, so what is your project about and similar. You can submit the deliverables that have been defined during the grant agreement. You can also report progress in achieving the milestones that have been defined also in the grant agreement and have been defined by you in the proposal. Follow up the critical risks, and then you need also to report on specific horizontal issues like the open access table, for example, the publications that you produce, the data sets. Then you need also to report concerning the activities, the dissemination or exploitation, and some specific policy questionnaires. The periodic reporting module is, well, extending a little the functionality of the continuous reporting. So you also have a technical part, which comes also from the continuous reporting. So the tables, they are similar, they are synchronized, as we will explain. And then there is a part B also that needs to be submitted as a PDF. So on top of reporting through the standard tables, which are structured, you need to provide also a document that explains also the progress and the activity for the work packages, any deviations, if there are any, from the description of the action. And then there is an additional part through which you have to submit the costs and the financial statements, individual for each beneficiary and consolidated for the consortium, and where you also need to provide explanation on the use of resources, in-kind contribution by third parties, and of course to submit, if requested, as we said, certificates on the financial payments. The periodic reporting module is active only when the time of reporting has after the closure of a reporting period, and through that you need to submit, of course, because it is linked also with the payments. So if you want to have a look what what is contained in the reporting, you can always go through the portal and through the templates, the available templates for the specific program, Horizon Europe in our case. You can see the periodic report template, which consists all of the questions that you will need to answer during the submission of your report. So how it looks in the system and what we need to do by accessing, of course, the portal and logging in. This is something standard. You go in the area My Projects, so you will see all the projects that you manage, and then through the actions you go to manage your projects and you enter in the specific project. Here, as we have explained also in other sessions, you have all the activities that are related. So here we have completed the proposal submission. We have done also the grant preparation, and now once we signed, it is a new project, you will have a new, let's say, workflow that will stay open for all the duration of your project, which is the continuous reporting. So by clicking on it, you can enter in the grant management tool and the specific screen. So this is what you will encounter once you click on the, of course, there could be different, let's say, tabs depending on the type of action. You can have a slight, let's say, additional specific variations depending on the action of so there could be additional tabs or there could be a small difference. Here, by starting, the first one that you encounter is the project summary. So as it says, you need to provide a summary. Most likely it will be quite similar to what you have described in the proposal. So you need to answer the what is your project about, what it is, and please, the only thing we have to remind you is that you need to write in plain language to answer these questions, because this is a section that will be published in Cordi. So it is what will be communicated to the external world about your project. So your language needs to be also simple so that other people who are not experts in the field can understand. Also, please bear in mind that as we already notify, also it's written in the template, this information will be published. So if you have some kind of information that you would not like to share, very specific about your project, then please do not put any sensitive information there. So the next section is the deliverables. That is something that you have already described in the grant agreement preparation and should also be transferred from the proposal. So here we have the submission. You can do the submission of the deliverables, so you can upload. If the delivery date falls in a given reporting period and you have not yet submitted it, then you will have a warning, so you will also need to justify the delay. Of course, here something important that has been defined during the grant agreement preparation is the sensitivity level. And please, okay, the different sensitivity levels are public or sensitive mostly. The others, they are very specific anyway. We don't handle sometimes in the system, or we manage externally. But the important is that if your project is defined as public, then please take care also that no sensitive or personal data information that should not be public is there, or if needed, you can change the dissemination level through an amendment, because if the deliverable is marked as public and it is approved by the project officer, then goes to, also it is externalized, so it will be available to the public. So if again you have some kind of confidential information or personal data that should not make the deliverable public, please ensure that it has the proper level of dissemination. Now you can see we have different statuses. It is pending, that we are expecting for it. You have already uploaded the draft, but then everybody can upload, from the beneficiaries can upload the deliverable, but it is the coordinator who has the final response to click the button submit. I will try to briefly reply to a question that was already asked in the section of amendments. So if you see, we have the due date, and in sometimes, in order to avoid going through an amendment, if you really want to have a little more time, let's say, to submit the deliverable, of course, reasonable, we say for short periods, you know, because otherwise, of course, you will have to agree with the project officer. In any case, also, we did the approval here of the project officer. So if you need a little more time to submit the deliverable, the project, you can enter here the request, and then the project officer can approve it, which is a way to bypass, let's say, the procedure of requiring you to do an amendment. So for short delays, if we can say that are normal and they can be accepted with the project officer, we can go even here from the reporting module, we can request an extension of the deadline, and the project officer can approve it without going through the amendment. Of course, this will not be reflected in the official formal document, but it is considered as approval from the Commission side that you will submit in a date that is a little later than the foreseen initially. So here is the submission of a deliverable. You can add a comment and confirm, whatever you want to send a message, for example, together with the submission of deliverable. Every beneficiary, as we said, can upload, but only the coordinator has the final response to officially submit them. Then, when there is a deliverable submitted on the EU side, the project officer and the people who are also backup, they will be notified. And if the deliverable is rejected, it will be then the coordinator contacts will receive an email, an automatic message from the system that will notify them about that, and they need to resubmit the deliverable. So you will receive in the funding and tenders folder a notification that you have to go and resubmit the deliverable. So now we have also the milestones, which are also part of the initial proposal and the grant agreement preparation. Here you need to inform about the delivery date and the foreseen and the actual. So if you really reach the milestone within the specific deadline that you had received. We said also in the amendments that if you want to do changes to the beneficiary that is managing a lead, which is the lead beneficiary for the milestone, you need to go through an amendment. Another also question that we receive sometimes is that if an associated partner can be a lead beneficiary, which the answer is yes. So here we have the critical risks. So these are the ones that you have defined also from the initial. So you have foreseen some risks that may be an obstacle to the implementation or cause delays. So you need always to go to the critical risk session and update on the status of the risk, if they have been materialized, what are the counter measures that you are taking in order not to materialize. And you can also sometimes include unforeseen risks, something that has not been, was not known at the time of the starting of the action, and then it came up during the course of the implementation of the project. Another tab that has been revised for Horizon Europe is the one that you report on the dissemination activities. So in Horizon 2020, we had just some kind of numerical data that you needed to enter. Here you need to enter in Horizon Europe. We are asking you more qualitative data to assess. So you need to enter the type of dissemination activities, what was the target group, what was the aim, if it is completed the task or not, and so on. So you need to enter all the dissemination activities with a short description and explain what was the target group and what came out of it. Similar to the communication activities, again here we have a descriptive, let's say, tab. So we need to enter the communication activities and what was the target group, what was the channels that you used, and of course if the action has been completed or if it is ongoing or pending. Another tab that is also new for Horizon Europe is the one that you need to report on the researchers involved in the project. So here there are some basic elements that you need to be aware of. So first is that we are asking the researchers and the researchers only, so you don't need to report on all the personnel that is taking part in the project. You need to report the people who are doing research. So even if the salaries are covered by other means, so whoever is participating and engaging in research activities, you need to enter the names here. The purposes that we collected data are for statistical use, for the evaluation of the project. So you will see easily that, okay, we collect some basic information like the name, the surname, and the email, and also some kind of descriptive let's say, information about what is the type of engagement. For example, if you have an important role in the project, what is your seniority level, so that we can also assess, because the question that was behind the introduction of this table was that the Parliament also has asked to report on the overall impact of the program to the careers of researchers. And this is a task that we have already tried in the past to answer, but without knowing anything, just knowing the organization, we could never, it was very difficult to trace people who are in the deliverables or anything else. So the purpose here is to receive some information about the people who are involved, if the program also helped to advance their careers, that we are hoping to. So you might receive in the future a questionnaire to answer specific questions, but we also receive here some basic information that will give us a first indication. Now, who should be entered? We said the researchers. Now, if you really want to see what is the definition of a researcher, we have the link here to the Frascati manual. Basically also it's quite generic. It means people who are involved in research activities. For example, if you have a person that is just doing some kind of basic laboratory configuration or something like that, maybe it does not need to be reported here. But people who are engaged in research, there are also some type of actions that by default do not have the primary focus, let's say, like the coordinating and support actions. So in that case, if you really do not have researchers, you can also check the button on the left and define that you do not have researchers in the project. But in principle, you should also add the people who are coming as they join. So this should be a continuous updated list. You don't need to remove somebody after the contract expires, for example. So it needs just to be like a record that you have of all the people who worked in research activities in the project. Removing also should not happen, and especially for the key personnel that you have defined in the proposal, because this will raise questions from the project officer. They need to assess also that if you had promised somebody to participate from the proposal and this was maybe a factor that gave you a high, let's say, score in the evaluation, and you say when the project starts that this person will not work, then of course we need to check why and what happened, because this maybe was a reason that you received the high score. So in general, you should not delete researchers, and you should also make sure that the people that you promise during the proposal and gap later are also actively participating in the project. You don't need to know them all in advance. The way, of course, we know is that as the project continues, we learn, we find new people who will work, and of course in that case you need to add them, and it's not necessary to know them in advance, but you need to report them as they come, and of course the ones that you promised from the beginning should be there. So now there are some specific tables that are to what we call this policy related data. For example, the publications, which fall under the category of what we call open access, let's say, obligations. So as you know, also in Horizon 2020, and we had the obligation that every publication which resulted from a project that we fund should be accessible. So this is also the case now, although there are a few more, let's say, requirements that you need to ensure. So one of them is that you need to submit the day you receive the acceptance from the journal. You need the peer-reviewed publications in general. You need to submit a copy to a fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, usable. These are the properties. So a fair repository, you need to submit the same day a copy of it. And this is to ensure that it will stay forever, because sometimes the journals maybe cease production. So we need to have this publication, and by ensuring this, you need to find the repository, open access repository, and submit a copy of the accepted article. Now, the second is that there are no embargo periods. So in Horizon 2020, for some of the scientific disciplines, you could have a 6 months embargo from the time of acceptance until the time you would make it open. So we don't have any more this embargo. So the first day, all type of publications need to be made accessible through open access model. Then an important one that you have to be careful is that when you submit to a journal and you want to claim costs, then you need to make sure that they are fully open access. Fully open access and not hybrid means that all the articles, not only yours, are accessible. So if you submit in any type of journal and you make it accessible, open access, you are covered. But if you want to claim costs for the publication, then you have to make sure that it is fully open access, just to avoid misunderstandings, because there are very many well-known journals also that do not have the full open access model. Of course, you will be compatible if you publish there, but you cannot use, you cannot claim costs through publication costs through the project if you publish there. So please be careful in order to avoid later that you have some cost rejections if you do that. Now, data sets also, another type of results need also, for example, if you produce software, in principle it has to be made open access, except if there is a reasonable way to grant you an exception. For example, if you have data that are sensitive medical data and you cannot publish it, this could be just an example. Now, the publications table looks similar to what was in the previous. There are some additional columns. It might shouldn't look scary for you. It's standard metadata like the name of the journal, the date, the issue, and so on. And many of them, as we will explain, will be collected automatically. But you have to be careful here because we have the concept of the repository now. So there is the PID, so it's the hyperlink, the URL, if we could say. In our case, it's called, in most cases, PID, the generic term, because there's not only the URL, so you can have DOI or other types. But you have to see, we have the deposited publication in the repository, so we have the hyperlink, this URL, and there is also the publisher version of the record. So here, if you enter the repository you are covered, this is the one that is at the publisher site, at the journal. The other are standard metadata, which we will explain. They are collected, in most cases, automatically or semi-automatically. So if you put only the URL here, the system will retrieve all the other data. You don't need to type manually in most, let's say, of the cases, with a few exceptions. And there are two only questions that concern what we said before, the obligations, the additional obligations. So you have to answer if you really deposited a copy of the article in a repository at the same day of the publication. And of course, if you have charged the open access fees to the project, you will also have a warning that please be aware, as we said, if you use the hybrid journal, then the fees are not reimbursable. Now, in order to facilitate you, as we said, here is an example of an actual project. So this is the publications table, the one that is in the continuous reporting. And what you will see when you enter is a suggestion by the system of publications that are considered relevant to your project. So by knowing the project number, we collect through the project OpenAir, which you can also check by yourself. You can log in and see if you know your publications are there, so that the system can automatically suggest them. But in principle, we try to collect from different journals the link, so the ones that we think are relevant, and your task is facilitated, so you just need to say that this, yes, I recognize maybe all of them, and you can move them to the publications table, in which case you don't have to type the metadata of the publications that you produced. So here is a screen. Let's say that if you select one of them, you will see the metadata of a specific publication. By clicking accept, you can transfer it automatically here, and your task is much easier. And again, here you can also you can also encode in case we don't find it, and you cannot retrieve them by providing the hyperlink. In the worst case, you can also type, because there are journals also that do not provide such services. So if we cannot access the metadata of the publication in that limited, let's say, set of publications, you need to, or you can enter the information manually. Now, another table that is new in Horizon Europe is the results table, which where you have to define type of results like scientific discoveries, products, services, processes that you produce. You need also to flag if they are key exploitable in the way that they can be further exploited by to bring them to the market, let's say, if they have some kind of potential. And for this type of, except the scientific discoveries, if, for example, if you can define a product or something that can be patented and later exploited, in this case, you need to also provides some additional information concerning the ownership. So you need to define an owner, which could be one organization or even the whole consortium or a specific set of beneficiaries or even a person. Then we have also another table which consists of specific type of results like software or prototype. Here we have an example of some results. So you have to take in mind that we have, for example, all of the ones that we described are results. But what should be in the results table? Should I put publications? No. For publication, we have a separate table. Should I put data sets? No, we have a separate. But in here, you need to list the main, let's say, outcomes of the project in a generic way. For example, let's say that you produce a device. If you, this device that you developed also, you may patent it, and you have a patent, and then you have also publications later that you want to describe what came out of it. But here you just need to make the headlines, let's say, of your results. So you need to explain the device, you enter it in the results, you say it's a product, it is a key exploitable result. Yes, maybe you need, of course, to exploit it. So in that case, you would mark it as key exploitable result. And that is all you need. Now, if you have a scientific theory that you did, you can just, in brief, put the name of the theory and indicate that it is a theory. Then you might have publications around it. You will enter them in the publications table or data sets. Now, if you also develop a specific process, industrial process or something else, you can also enter it there. So here you need to list in brief, let's say, the main results of your project. And later, if you have publications or other specific artifacts related to this, you can do it in the relevant tables. So here is an example. You just list the result. You have a theory. You say it's a scientific theory. You don't need to do other. You have a product. Then you will also need to mark if it is key exploitable. And then you need also to define who is the owner. For example, you can say that it is one or two beneficiaries or even the whole consortium, because later you have other obligations for exploitation, or we also have services to help you with exploiting the results. So we need to know who is the owner of the result. Here is an additional table that you need to define if produced. For example, if you have software, this is another type of specific, let's say, type of result that you also need to make available through open access, but you can define it in the other results table. So here, if you have one of these, the different types, software or workflow, prototype or protocol you developed, you need to give us some information about this. And of course, if there is a link to be able to retrieve it. Now, if you have intellectual property rights, let's say, for example, patents, in that case, we have a specific table. If you already have awarded the patent, you can put, and you, for example, because the European Patent Office also collects from the national registries. So if there is something registered in the European Patent Office database, you can just put the reference and we will retrieve the data for you. Now, you can also define at the level of submitting an application, which in that case usually it's marked as confidential because you cannot reveal probably the information. But I would kindly remind you, and we are also working on it, to send notifications. So if you have defined it and there is this kind of embargo period of 18 months, and probably in the meantime it has been awarded, so please go there. Do not forget to go again in the relevant section even after the end of the project, and please update the reference of the patent so that we are also collecting this information, which is important for us to evaluate the program, because this is a number that we are collecting it. Now, related to this IPR, there is an obligation that we need to remind you, and I will explain also what you can do through the system to respect the needs for the obligation. So in Horizon 2020 and in Horizon Europe, there is the obligation to notify in advance if you intend to transfer ownership of results or exclusive license to entities in third countries. So, well, I will just say it in maybe not the strict legal terms. For if you if you intend to exploit it exclusively or to sell, if I could say that, in a patent or another IPR, you need first, and in a third country, not one member state or associated country, so in another country that does not participate at all, and you need to exclusively, you want to exclusively transfer, you need to notify the authority with some specific information, which are the results that you plan to transfer, what is the intended new owner, what is the plan for exploitation, and why you think you need to do that, let's say this transfer, and if it is compatible with the EU interest. The granting authority will have 60 days to assess the request, and they can also object to the transfer of ownership or the grant of the exclusive license if it is not compliant with the competitiveness interests of the European Union or other ethical or security considerations. So how you can do that? To notify us that you intend to transfer exclusively to a third country. Then you can go through the portal. You can launch a formal notification, and now there is a drop-down box that you select that you intend to transfer exclusive licenses of exclusive transfers of IPR, and then you will you send a formal notification, and you will be notified about that. Then there could be also an exchange of information with the project officer if more information is required, and you will receive an official reply. If not, then within the formal, let's say, period of the 60 days that we said, then it's considered tacit approval. If it is objected, then you cannot, you are bound by the decision. You can see also the template that you need to use. There is specific questions that you need to answer, and here we have provided the link. So also be reminded about this obligation. Now, other tables that you need to fill, if you produce data sets, of course, they need also to be in open form. Sorry. So after the data sets, there is a section also that is required to fill until the end of the project, also in the reporting period. So there are specific questions that are for statistical purposes also, like, well, there is a number of questions, so I have put them in tables. I will not stay a lot, I will just explain, for example, what is the technological readiness of the project, if it is conception or to very advanced stages that you exploit, let's say, some kind of product. What is the sustainable development goals? There is a set of, let's say, goals that are defined by the UN. So where is your project contributing to? The citizen engagement tab. Then there are also some specific questions about the impact of the project. So you have to describe in brief. If you plan to exploit the results, if you plan to create a company, specific questions. For statistical reasons, again, you don't need to provide, for example, yes, I plan to exploit it in that manner as I want to make it open access, I want to launch a dedicated company, I need to hire personnel, and some questions concerning, let's say, the difficulties that you encountered or other. So now we'll go in brief to the periodic reporting modules. So when the reporting period ends, you will receive a notification that it is time now to submit your periodic report. Then there is a part, the technical, that you need also to define the tables. You need also to complete, to contribute also to the document that you will upload, and submit the financial statements and sign them also. So we have this role, the project financial signatory, that is defined for each project, for each beneficiary, and they need to approve the financial statements. So we will receive and assess the periodic report. We accept or reject it for specific reasons that you will be notified, and then there is a periodic payment linked to it. So when you enter in the portal, you will see now, except from the continuous reporting that is always open during the lifetime of the project and stays even after. So you need to enter, you see the periodic report. It has specific tasks that need to be submitted. There is the financial statements, the technical part, and of course the data that are common with the continuous reporting. So there is a synchronization between the two modules. The difference here in the periodic report is that you will have an extra tab where you need to upload the technical report, and you need to write the explanations of what is the work performed, the impact of the action, things that need to be assessed by the experts who will assist the project officer. So please avoid repetitions. You just need to define what was not possible to define in the previous tables. And once the technical part is ready, everybody can contribute, then you upload the document, and the coordinator only is able, so everybody can contribute, but only the coordinator is the one who will lock it for review and submit later to the authorities or the granting authority. Yes, so here, you receive the project office, the coordinator will accept and review the contribution for each beneficiary, and then finally they will submit the report after, of course, there is also the financial part field. Now, for the financial part, each beneficiary, they can start claiming costs in the respective categories. Here it is, as you see, there are some areas that you need to, they have an editable field, so there you need to enter the amount that you claim. And for some, there is a link also next to them that you need to add an additional information. So it's the section of the use of resources. For example, the personnel costs, you might you will be required also per work package to submit an estimation of the person months to link the amount that you have claimed with this additional information. And then, of course, you claim costs for all the categories. Again, what will happen is that once the financial signatory for each beneficiary signs and submit, then the coordinator will review and accept the contributions or ask to a beneficiary to do specific changes if needed. And once all the contributions have been gathered and the total financial statement for the project has been completed, then the coordinator is the only one who can submit, and we click to submit to the EU for reviewing. And I think with that, we have concluded the technical part, and we can go to the question section.
Thank you very much, Petros. We are receiving quite a lot of questions, so let's go quickly to them. First question. In the event of not being able to travel due to weather conditions, can travel and accommodation costs be justified if hotel and airline don't want to reimburse them? Who is that for?
I don't know if Bartosz can help. I think it's a little...
Yes, I think that this is related to eligibility conditions for the costs, and in particular for the travel and subsistence costs. And the cost must comply with the eligibility conditions set out in the Article 6.2 C1. In particular, they need to fulfill, of course, general conditions for the actual cost to be eligible. So they need to be incurred during the action, duration, necessary link to the action, and they should be in line with the beneficiary usual practices on the travel. So in general, paying a ticket for a travel that eventually did not take place because the flight was cancelled would fail to comply with this condition as the task was not performed. In any case, it needs to be assessed whether this situation could fall under the definition of force majeure. And to qualify as force majeure, the situation must be inevitable. So it cannot concern events that could reasonably have been anticipated or prevented. So, for instance, this could have been avoided by having an insurance to the trip covering the cancellations. So, really, it depends on the case here.
Thank you very much, both of you. How is decided what is considered as equipment, depreciation costs, and what can be regarded as purchase of goods, full cost?
So this depends on your internal practice and national legislation. What you consider as equipment according to your national legislation and your internal practice. All the costs in Horizon Europe have to fulfill the specific cost eligibility conditions of each cost category. So if the costs fulfill the eligibility conditions for the purchase cost, and according to your practice, they are not considered as equipment, they may be reported as purchase costs. But again, about the cost of equipment, please note that the depreciation is the standard option used for the equipment costs, and the full cost option may be activated only when it is foreseen in the call conditions.
Thank you, Bartosz. I think the next one is also for you. Can the institution reduce the total number of people month to fit with the total amount allocated for work on the project when the salary costs are higher?
So you should report all your costs related to the action, even if the costs exceed the maximum grant amount. This is to protect your interest. For example, in case of an audit, some costs may be rejected, and then if you have reported more cost, then the maximum grant amount may more cost than the maximum grant amount. This may result that the audit findings would not affect the money that you have received. So if you have if an audit was that 20,000 euro was used not correctly, then if you have reported more than 20,000 above the maximum grant amount, then you will not have to repay the money to the commission. So I would tend to say that you should report the costs according to the reality. And if your PM rate, if the personal costs are higher than expected, then they should be reported as it is.
Thank you. The next question. Is the average people month costs declared in the budget exceeds the real cost? What actions can be taken?
So as I said just before, you have to report all your costs, and it depends on whether you are below or over the maximum grant amount. In case you are below the maximum grant amount, then, as my colleague said, it falls into the budget flexibility, and the budget can be transferred between the budget categories and the beneficiaries. So if one of the beneficiaries is underspending, then the other beneficiary may use his unused budget. So if the personnel cost fulfill all the eligibility conditions, notably necessary for the action, reasonable, and so on, the cost should not be rejected. So as I said before, you have to report all your personnel costs according to annotated model grant agreement and to the reality, of course.
But we can never go beyond the maximum grant amount.
Yes, yes, of course.
So you can use the budget flexibility, as Bartosz said, in case you have a possibility, or otherwise you should report it, but you will not receive more, but you can benefit in case of an audit, as you can see.
Next question. If the average... sorry.
This one that we replied already.
Do the payments from the coordinator to the partner in the same country, Sweden, for example, have to be done in euros, or can they be in the local currency?
So this part is the internal matter of the consortium. What we care about is about the reporting in euro. So in principle, it is possible that the beneficiaries among themselves would set up different currency to send the money. However, what we will need from the beneficiaries would be that we need your reports in euros. So even if you have received the money from the coordinator in Swedish korona, then it does not mean that you can report in Swedish korona. You will have to report in euro.
Thank you. Next question is from the Spoina reporting. An expat postdoc works on an Horizon Europe project. Should we include her health insurance in personal costs or somewhere else? What about her work visa?
So I think that this question is about the eligibility criteria of personal costs. So the personal costs can include any component that is legally obligatory by national law, the employment contract or similar act. This can include health insurance and other social security contributions. These personal costs may also include other complements like a work visa, if this is necessary for the action, and if this is the usual remuneration practice to pay for work visas, like the beneficiary has to pay the work visas. And this is not only for EU actions.
Thank you. The next question. In Maria Zlodowska-Curie action, the end project, can the receiving partner invoice the sending partner for material costs related to a developing country's secondment? This will be covered from RTN costs.
So, to be honest, I'm not an expert in Maria Skłodowska-Curie, so I would invite you to watch the videos, our videos regarding the MSCA, or send the question using the Research Inquiry Service.
There is also an FAQ list which contains for specific type of actions what is eligible or not. So maybe you can also look in the funding and tender portal for the Maria Skłodowska-Curie eligibility costs, where there are specific examples. Because we are not aware of all of them. You know, there are many different actions with different type of cost categories, very specific to the action. So maybe you can, or otherwise you can always submit through the help desk, and the colleagues who are responsible for Marie Curie can explain to you.
Thank you both.
We'll take the next one, maybe.
Sorry. Yeah, you take the next one. Yes. Is there a reporting form we can use? Is there a best practice case?
Well, the reporting form, as we explained, if you go in the portal, you select the program, Horizon Europe in our case, and then it has the available templates, and then you see the periodic form with all the questions that you will be asked to answer. And there is also, of course, if you log in the portal, you will see how the system looks. But the reporting also has specific instructions, sometimes in questions, so you need to see what you need to reply. Of course, we tried also to explain what we aim in receiving from each question. So if you watch also the video, if you don't remember everything, you can see what more or less you have to do and what you have to answer.
Thank you. The next question, if a beneficiary, no, we have changed. So about timesheets, is timesheet necessary for the in-kind personnel that the costs will be claimed? If yes, is it sufficient to keep the timesheets only for the project time?
So I want to start with saying that in-kind contribution against payment is not a budget category anymore. Still, in Horizon Europe, it is allowed to declare these costs under the category of the personal costs seconded as a seconded persons against payment. And yes, you need to keep the timesheets of the seconded personnel, and they may be limited only for the project time.
Thank you. The next question, this one is really about the beneficiary. If a beneficiary enters a project after start date, should the daily rate be calculated from this date or for the whole reporting period?
So the rules regarding the daily rate and the calculation of the daily rate are the same for all the beneficiaries. So even if the beneficiary have entered into the project later, it does not mean that he may use different calculation method. So for him, the periodic report time is also the same as for the other beneficiaries. So the answer is the whole reporting period.
Next question. CFS does not have to be reported every time the threshold is reached, only once in the final report?
Yes, that's correct. There is only one exception in case of EIT kicks actions, I think. But in general, the CFS have to be reported only once at the end of the project if the threshold is reached.
Perfect. Could you please give examples of a justified delay for payment from the coordinator to the beneficiaries?
The most common that I'm aware of is that the consortium are using the internal reporting. So according to the consortium agreement, not the whole pre-financing is paid at the beginning of the action to the beneficiaries, and the coordinator keeps the part of pre-financing way of sending the money to the partners of the consortium.
Thank you. How is the PF sign role created? Is it created first by the leader at organization level? As coordinator contact, I do not see this option in the portal.
This is for me. So the PF sign role is a role specific to the project. The leader is creating a list of F signs, so financial signatories. So it is, you can have one or more persons who are allowed to sign financial statements on behalf of the organization, and these are created by the leader. Then when you enter in GAP, you need to define, so the coordinator contract needs to define one of the financial signatories if there is more than one, and assign them to the project, which means that they become PF sign, project financial signatories. So you don't declare yourself, you just select from the list of available ones. If there is not one selected, you need to ask the leader to assign one, and then by selecting them, you assign and become project financial signatory. If you had not done that, you would not be able to sign the GAP. So usually there is an error that one of the beneficiaries has not created the project financial signatory. But you don't define the role for a person yourself. Of course, as we say, it is a role-based activity. So you can have one person, maybe even the leader is assuming the same role, or there is one person who is PF sign and PL sign also. They also sign the legal documents and the financial ones. But the leader is responsible for doing that, and then you select.
Thank you. The next one is also for you, Petros. Yeah. Is there any place that has a list of documents that have to be submitted for payment?
Well, what you submit for payment, I mean, if you are referring also, for example, what you submit is, as we said, the financial statement. So you will do that in the system. Now, for other documents like templates, the certificate finances, mostly the information for you is the portal. So you will see all the information that is related to the project management in the portal. By searching to it, as we showed you, maybe you can go back to the slides and you can see there is a section in the portal. There is always the documentation. You select the type of program first, of course, Horizon Europe in our case, and then you select in the available templates, and you will see everything starting from the definition during the proposal, the management of the grant, and all the other documents that you need to submit.
Thank you. The next question. What is the purpose of the CFS? It plays no role in case of an audit from the Commission, or does it?
So the role of CFS is to help the project officer to take the informed decision on the final payment. So the project officer has to assess the CFS and other documents received during reporting to take decision on payment. So this is the purpose of the CFS. And again, I would like to invite you to watch the webinar on CFS, which is very good in my opinion.
Thank you. The next question is about the purchase of goods. Do all the documents have to be in English? For example, the invoices?
So the supporting documents they don't have to be in English. Only the reports must be drafted in the language of the grant agreement. However, supporting documents may be in your language.
Thank you. The next one I think is for you, Petros. It looks like all beneficiaries have access to continuous reporting tabs. Is there a backup to recover the data if someone deletes important information by mistake?
Well, there is no backup. The only thing that you can retrieve is if you have submitted a periodic report, so you can have the data that were at that time frozen. Because the continuous reporting is, as the word says, it is a continuous update. So it is a list that you provide and you enrich and you enrich. But we don't have this kind of autosave or whatever. So it is the responsibility, because anyway, legally speaking, it is the information that is submitted during the periodic reports that will be evaluated. Actually, this is something that I try to explain. Sometimes we see that beneficiaries delete publications in order to have only the ones that are for the reporting period. You shouldn't do that. There are specific elements that need to be always updated. You never reflect only for the information for the reporting period to the tabs that are in continuous reporting. So if somebody deleted it, we cannot know if it is on purpose or not to recover the data. If you have submitted a periodic report previously, you can compare to the data that were in the periodic report that were frozen and then try to recover this information. But it was between reporting periods, then we don't keep, let's say, this data. We are only facilitating the updating of information so that you can always submit the button at the end and freeze the data. No, if you did a deletion between two reporting periods, the intermediate data are lost.
Thank you. Next question. Can visa costs be claimed?
I think he answered already.
Yeah, I have already answered to this question. So yes, if this is internal practice of the beneficiary to pay for this cost, then they can be charged as personal cost.
Thank you. The rate of the prepayment for a project varies. How it is calculated or decided?
So the amount of pre-financing depends on the size of the budget, nature of the tasks, the timing of the tasks, the number of reporting periods, and also the condition of the European Union budget. So in case you think that your pre-financing at the gap stage is too low, and if you have good explanation, for example, that majority of the project is at the beginning of the project or the most expensive tasks, then you can discuss with your project officer about the amount of pre-financing.
Next question. How does the Commission ensure an access to personal data of researchers on the portal on a need-to-know basis and enable beneficiaries to comply with data protection?
Well, this is, well, I mean, there are different elements in this question. It's not straightforward. It has many aspects. The Commission, first of all, as you know, we are publishing also the data protection on the portal, so you can see. I mean, we first also we ensure that only the beneficiary can have access to their specific researchers tab, so we do not make accessible to all the consortium, with one exception. Only the coordinator can see the other tabs, and this is also something that was requested in 2 years ago, maybe in another, let's say, webinar. So it was requested online, and we wanted to show you that we take care of what, you know, we listen, let's say, to the request, because in the past we saw that many times the beneficiary could not submit the periodic report because there was an error and they didn't know in which tab. So in that case, we, let's say, facilitated the coordinator to be able to go and request the beneficiary who had the error to do it. But apart from that, we make sure that no other beneficiary has access to the researcher's data. Of course, we are always, you know, taking very seriously, and as I said, you can always consult with the data protection rules. Now, concerning, if you are talking about how the beneficiaries themselves treat the data on their side, they are also, well, considering that they are, of course, in the European area, they are also need to respect the data privacy rules. I think, and of course, for the processing of the data, we are also bound by all the regulation, and we make sure also to comply and make also available, as I said, with the data protection notices that we publish in the portal, and which you are also invited to consult and to see that we ensure all the legislation measures are, let's say, respected.
Thank you. The next question is about amendments, but we have already answered something very similar to that before. I don't know if you want to go back to it.
Yes, the periodic reports, if you need to change the dates or the deadlines, you need to do an amendment, official amendment, because it affects also the data sheet, so it's in the annex too.
Thank you. If the budget is increased by AMD before the second payment, when is the difference paid?
The budget, the total budget. I mean, maybe they are talking about the hop-on. I don't know, Bartosz, you understand?
Well, I know that when there is a increase of maximum grant amount, then the amendment is not only about the maximum grant amount, but also it increases the amount of the MIM, and also increases the amount of the pre-financing. But majority of the budget you will receive at the final payment, for sure.
Yes.
This is what I'm...
We cannot do, yes. I mean, if there is already a payment, we cannot do a second pre-financing. This maybe is is the question about. We cannot give a pre-financing because the moment you start claiming costs, we do not have this concept of pre-financing. So the way to manage this is either by reshuffling, let's say, the distribution of the first pre-financing within the consortium, or by organizing a reporting period in short time so that you can receive additional money by claiming costs. But if it concerns the increase of the maximum grant amount and the first payment has been done, you cannot receive a pre-financing. If this was the question, because I mean, it's not very clear what you are asking.
It's not very... And yes, it's not very common to
yes,
have the increase of the budget during the
we don't,
duration.
In principle, yes, we don't do in Horizon increases of budget, with the exception of these hop-on calls for the widening actions.
Thank you very much, both of you. We have reached our time. We have only half an hour left, and we are going now to proceed with the next presentation about fraud prevention, detection, and correction. The speaker is Manuela SERRANO, who is an auditor from the Common Implementation Center, and I think she is remotely connected. So, Manuela, please, yes, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I think, please let me know if you see well the screen.
So far, okay? So far I don't see it. But
can you see?
Apparently, yes, it's seen.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
it's okay.
You so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I introduce myself. Yes, and you can see here, my name is Manuela. I'm working as anti-fraud policy officer in Common Implementation Center, particularly in the Common Audit Service. As an OLAF anti-fraud correspondent, particularly in fraud prevention, because my task is mainly to prevent and detect fraud in research and innovation framework programs. Also with me is my colleague Rosaria Massone. She works also on audit selection, and she is the OLAF and EPPO correspondent in our DG RTD. So I would explain that this presentation is composed of two parts. The first one focused on general definition of fraud and the role of the beneficiary in fraud prevention and detection. And the second part contains 4 cases of cyber attacks affecting beneficiaries of EU grants and how to prevent and react to them in case they occur. So we go to the first part. It's composed, as you can see, there are different points. The first is to explain to you the objective of this presentation. See the definition of fraud and why fraud is committed, why fight against fraud, the most common types of fraud in research and innovation programs, the anti-fraud cycle with the different actors in every step of this cycle, of this anti-fraud cycle, and what can beneficiaries do for fraud prevention and detection. So we go here. The presentation is, which is the objective of this presentation, is to raise awareness of anti-fraud issues among coordinators, beneficiaries. Because why? Because in the implementation of all the research and innovation framework programs, fraud prevention and detection has proven to be the best way to protect the R&I budget. So here you will see a general definition of fraud, and will be very important, the role of beneficiaries. Mainly will be to pay attention to red flags, keep evidence, quickly report to your project officer, OLAF, and EPPO. Why? Because in this way, not only we will protect the R&I budget, but also because you will benefit of the proper and lawful implementation of the project, of the action. So we go to the first slide, which is more the definition of fraud. Why? In the first sentence, you will see a general definition of fraud, but what is important is to focus on fraud affecting the union's financial interest, which is a criminal offense. So fraud is an intentional breach of the union law by action or omission in the sense of Article 3 of this directive, which is the directive on the fight against fraud to the union's financial interest by means of criminal law. With this action and omission damage the union's financial interest. For that, there are three elements in fraud: intentionality, breach of the union law, and damages of the union financial interest. On the contrary, irregularity has only two elements, which is an illegal actions, and that damages the union financial interest. I will detain a little bit about on this article, because this, if you go, here is the hyperlink, but if you open, you can see that what is considered fraud, and is the use or presentation of false, incorrect, or incomplete statements of documents which results in misappropriation or wrongful retention of funds. But also is the non-disclosure of information in violation of a specific obligation with the same effect, or fraud is also the misapplication of such funds or assets for purposes other than those for which they were originally granted. Now we go to the reasons behind fraud. This is important because understanding which are the reasons for fraud is important to prevent and detect fraud. So there are several, two theories, and here is the fraud diamond theory. Here, in this, following this theory, there are four reasons. Incentive is the motivation. The motivation to commit fraud normally is because there is a financial need. Opportunity. Opportunity is the perceived or actual possibility to commit fraud. For example, weaknesses of an internal control system. Rationalization is the personal justification of fraudsters. For example, the feeling of deserving additional financial rewards. The last one is capability. Capability is the situation of having the skills, traits, abilities for the person to commit fraud. For example, position, intelligence, ego, etc. And now we continue with why fight against fraud. Firstly, I would like to clarify that the Commission has zero tolerance to fraud. And fraud is a risk with a low occurrence rate in research and innovation programs, but a high reputational impact. So fraud represents in a very limited part of irregular spending, most of which is related to errors. If you want to know statistics, in the last slide, you can find public reports with this information. But why? Why? Because EU citizens deserve that EU budget to be spent in a sound and efficient way and for the intended purposes. So we go now with the most common types of fraud and serious irregularities in research and innovation grants. Intentional inflation of costs and fictitious costs, mainly personnel costs, but also equipment, travel, subcontracting costs, are jointly with misrepresentation and falsification of invoices and other supporting documents the most common types of fraud. Misrepresentation is, I mentioned, is the false declaration. For example, a false statement declaration, or a declaration of working, for example, of the working time, or the declaration on honors, or the absence of an exclusion situation, or for example, having the financial and operational capacity. And falsification of supporting documents can be not only contracts, subcontracts, time records, etc. Or other possible common types of fraud are fraudulent bankruptcy, intentionally irregular subcontracting, also cases of undisclosed conflict of interests, double funding, plagiarisms, also fictitious or self-beneficiaries. And now we go to the anti-fraud cycle. Here you will see the cycle, which starts with the risk assessment, later prevention, detection, investigation, and correction. Most of the cases of fraud are detected during the implementation of the project and also after the implementation by auditors. But the idea of this training is try to increase the possibility to prevent and also detect cases of potential fraud during the grant agreement preparation before the signature of the contract. And now we go to the responsible actors in the different steps of this cycle. For fraud prevention and detection, firstly is every responsible authorizing officer in the, for example, particularly in the R&I family, they have the obligation to implement and to put in place an internal control system. This system is composed of different elements, for example, risk assessment, control strategies, anti-fraud strategy. So, concerning the R&I family, we have a common anti-fraud strategy that was updated last year. This strategy deals with external fraud committed by beneficiaries concerning grants. But in addition, with this common strategy, there are also sectorial anti-fraud strategy by any member of the R&I family, every DG, executive agency, and joint undertakings. For these sectorial anti-fraud strategies, these strategies tackle with external, internal fraud, or, for example, for fraud related to not only to grants, but also procurement, for example, or financial instruments. In addition, with the responsible authorization officer, also granting authority, there are also an obligation to for fraud prevention and detection for any staff members in the particular field of responsibility. They have the obligation to report any suspicion of fraud, and they are supported by anti-fraud correspondent in each service. In addition, beneficiary EU coordinator has also an important role that I will explain later in fraud prevention and detection. And at the end is explained OLAF. OLAF is the European Anti-Fraud Office. You know that OLAF has an important role not only for investigation, but also this office, which is independent office in the investigation, has an important role also in elaborating and develop all the anti-fraud policy, EU anti-fraud policy. For that reason, they draft and commission, there is an uncommissioned anti-fraud strategy that was adopted in 2019, and recently, the last year, a new targeted action plan was updated. In this action plan, it's important, for example, foster digitalization is very important, corporate tools, reinforce cooperation and fraud prevention and ethics. We continue with responsible actors, now relating to fraud investigation. You know, as I mentioned before, OLAF has also an important role, is the office in charge of performed or carried out administrative investigations, internal and external investigation, not only fraud committed externally by beneficiaries, but also fraud committed or corruption, etc., committed by staff of the European institutions. So here is the regulation established this office. Jointly with OLAF, there is the European Public Prosecutor's Office, which started its operation in June 2021. This European office has the role of perform criminal investigations, prosecutions, and also bringing to judgment the criminal offenses, which is fraud, corruption, money laundering, misappropriation, but also included serious cross-border VAT fraud. For fraud correction, is responsible authorizing officer is responsible also for fraud correction. How? They have the possibility to put in place contractual measures. Normally, the OLAF recommendation for financial recommendations focus on a recovery of the concerned amounts, but also the responsible or granting authorities can, as you know, impose a suspension of payments, rejection of the costs, reduction of the grant, etc. And jointly with this, there are the regulatory or administrative sanctions. They can be imposed because these sanctions are established in the financial regulation, and they are imposed using the early detection and exclusion system. This involves the exclusion for participating in our procedures or a rejection for an ongoing our procedures, the imposition of financial penalties also, and included the possibility of publication of the findings in the European Commission's website. At the end, you have a hyperlink. This hyperlink is a working document jointly with the peer report. I will explain later which is the peer report. And here, if you click in this hyperlink, you will see not only what EDES is, but also this system, but also all the cases that were reported to the EDES panel in this year, last year. Sorry, in 2023 year. Now, the most important, this is very important slide, because here you will see what you can do for fraud prevention and detection. The important is pay attention to red flags, keep all evidence, and report early your suspicion and observation to your project officer and OLAF and EPPO. So, firstly, pay attention to bank accounts and contact details of participants. This will be important in case of cyber attacks, that I will explain later. And pay attention to other possible red flags. When I speak about red flags, I clarify that red flags are signs of potential fraud or serious irregularities. These indicators trigger your attention. So, for example, delays in response, poor or non-participation in meetings, or poor quality deliverables, or, for example, in cases of amendments, an early request for change, frequent subcontractor changes, or unclear distribution of subcontractor roles, etc. Secondly, as I mentioned before, keep all evidence and don't raise suspicion with the entity concerned, and report as soon as possible your suspicion and observation to your project officer, OLAF and EPPO. And here you have the hyperlinks to report any cases of fraud to the OLAF or EPPO. And now we go to the second part. When I mention new fraud patterns, is because they are new compared to the list that I explained before, because as you know, in general, cyber attacks are occurring more and more frequently in our daily and professional lives. But in this presentation, you find 4 possible cases which are affected, can affect coordinators or beneficiaries. The first one is important because in this case, the EU financial interests are affected. The others not, but are also important. I will explain now one by one. The first one, this is, as I mentioned, really relevant, which is fraudsters impersonate legitimate beneficiaries and sends emails that are very similar to the real ones, requesting pre-financing or even interim payments to be transferred to the fraudster's bank account. For that reason, please verify the bank account details, particularly the attention in case of request to changes such details. You can verify them through a trusted channel. As usual in any phishing email, don't reply to fraudulent communication, don't provide sensitive information, and report any suspected phishing incident immediately to the IT service desk, your granting authority, and also, as you know, as normal is the police, to ensure that the diversion of funds was the result of fraudulent activity. This is one. Another two different possible cases of cyber attacks are explained here. The first one is unsolicited emails, normally emails, but also can happen with calls, in sending by individuals offering false consultancy services to obtain EU funding for a project. For example, submit a well-written proposal in exchange for an upfront fee. So in that cases, no proposal is submitted or is totally unrelated to the topics, and the fraudster disappears. Many times, to falsify that the proposal had been submitted, they also falsified EU documents. Also, another possible situation, which is not very common but can happen, is the phishing emails or fake letters offering the award of EU grants. As you know, these are not very sophisticated because anyone knows that EU grants are subject to transparent and rigorous procedures securing open competition. However, this situation can occur and have occurred. So in these cases, they send letters or phishing emails announcing the award of EU grants that appear to be from the European Commission or its staff members. For that reason, they falsify documents, falsified also the signature of the staff, or they falsify or misrepresent the European Commission identity, the logo, etc., the European Commission. As unusual in any phishing email, they request personal information or money. So in that cases, it's important that you report these cases to the police, but also inform also the granting authority, because as I mentioned before, there are falsification of documents, and in that situation, the European Commission has also taken the appropriate actions. And the last one is this situation that was reporting in 2020, which is can happen now also, phishing messages to many users which look identical to the the portal notifications. In this case, as usual, as I mentioned, they are requesting personal information, password, ID, bank accounts, details, etc., under the pretext such as inviting you to update your pertinent information by clicking on a link, this is important, or downloading an attachment. For that reason, to prevent this situation, secure your tender account to your portal account with two-factor authentication. Check also that you use the portal URL address. Report any suspected phishing incident to the IT service desk. As normal, ignore them. Exercise caution when opening attachment or downloading the files. You will never be asked to send important personal or financial information directly via email. This is important. And all notifications sent by email are also available under the notification sent section available after login. I will show you this. So if you want to verify that the email is original, you can check in your inbox notification inbox here. And we finish now with the conclusion. So be alert that zero tolerance for fraud is important to protect the R&I budget. Pay attention to red flags. Report any suspicions as soon as possible to the granting authority and OLAF and EPPO. And this is the last part. And now, here in the last section slide, you will find hyperlinks for different public reports. The first one is the annual reports on the PIF report, which is the annual reports on the protection of the Union financial interests. There is a working document, as I mentioned before at the beginning, in which you can see statistics about fraud or irregularities also. Also, the annual management and performance report, you will go to the section related to fraud, and also the annual OLAF reports, and the EPPO annual reports, and also the website of the OLAF website and EPPO website. Now I finished. Please, now is the moment for your questions. Please, thank you for your attention. Thank you. Let me know, please.
Thank you very much, Manuela. We have received only 2 questions for you. Please make sure that you really use the correct room in Slido for your questions.
Yes, I'm going to open, please. Let me open.
Oh, don't worry. I can read them to you, no problem. And you have them on the screen now. So the first question was posted before you talked about OLAF and EPPO and EPO. So I don't think you have to answer it now, because it's what is OLAF, what is EPO. You have explained that enough, I think. The second question is, what kind of audits are you going to do in lump sum projects?
Yeah.
And again, we have said that before, actually. There is a specific training about lump sum. If you go to the financial tenders portal, you go under events. Under events, there was a lump sum training webinar. I think it was the 17th of October. You can check the different webinars we have. All the information is there. The presentations are there. And of course, the recording of the video is there. I don't know if you want to add something about this question, Manuela?
Only that there are no financial audits, only technical, I don't remember now, ex-post technical reviews. Only. There are no possible, because there are no possibility to check the financial information.
Thank you very much. The next 2 questions actually are related to the reporting part, reporting and payment part before. Grant payments to beneficiaries is not for this room. We are sorry, but the presenters from before, they are not here with us anymore. They have left. And how fresh signed back information is not for this specific presentation. So if there is nothing else, thank you, Manuela. And I want to thank not only the presenters who have been here this morning with us, but also the people who are here in the studio, in the technical room, Olivier Margan and Eugene Noe. They are taking care of the video, the recording, the sound, and of course, the broadcasting of the event. Finally, there is, not here, but in Poland, at home, Dominika Kotowicz is taking care of the Slido. She has organized all the Slido for you. So with that, I just want to thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for waiting until 1, the ones who have waited. And just again, to remind you that everything is in the portal. All our webinars are there for you to review at any moment you wish. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you very much again.
Bye.